An ordinary night city, and no one ever thought that something like this could happen here. The children just went on an excursion, and two of them fell behind the group and got lost. A couple in love and their dog were standing over a manhole because the girl dropped her phone there. They fell behind because the girl lost her phone, and now they were trying to find it. As it turned out, it fell straight into the sewer, into a narrow manhole. To get it, he opened the manhole and was angry at the girl all the time. He saw it at the very bottom in a pile of incomprehensible eggs. However, he had no choice. He had to get it. The guy reached out for it and screamed. Slippery eggs stuck to his hands and the device. They seemed to be devouring the boy's body, but he didn't understand what it really was. Appa was scared. He didn't know what was happening to him, but he understood. Something was definitely wrong. The girl noticed it too. After all, Appa just stopped. And he didn't answer. He just froze and stood there without moving. Suddenly, he felt that something was happening to him, because the eggs stuck to his hands and began to burst, causing him severe pain. They grew at an incredible speed, and gradually, they began to absorb his body. Appa called for help, but the girl chased him away and in the end ran away in fear. The girl started to run away with all her might, trying to save herself. She ran with such force that she tripped over her leg and fell. The girl found herself on the ground near the riverbank. She raised her head and saw in front of her a huge number of the same eggs. Near the river, the banks of which were simply strewn with disgusting eggs. The events moved to a school bus, where a group of school children were going on a field trip. Soon, they were supposed to be near Suel. This was their first trip, and none of them had been to this city before. Despite the fact that the trip was very long, the main character was not upset because the girl he liked was sitting opposite him. Despite the boring 2-hour trip, the boy was in a cheerful mood. After all, So-yeon, a beautiful dark-haired girl, sat where she could be seen perfectly. At school, the boy could not talk to her normally, so he did not want to waste time on the trip and invited So-yeon to walk around the shops and go for a meal. The main character blushed a lot from such a surprise. How did he get called from the front? It was Kim Joo-byung, his friend, who was a fan of the band Oki. He noticed the unhealthy look on the boy's face and offered him some gum. Their conversation was interrupted by a girl blogger. She took out a tripod with a phone and told them to wave if they wanted to be featured on her blog. The third grade of Chang'an School waved in unison for the Hong Kong TV blog. It was a small class, it only took up half of the bus. But the boy thought only about her all the time and tried to find an opportunity to get closer and talk. Finally, they arrived. The excursion began and the children amicably left the bus. And they began to look at the local architecture and monuments. The blogger filmed their every step wherever they went. Even the class teacher managed to catch a few words. The teacher told them about the history of this fascinating city. Everyone stood around the girl with the camera and filmed for the blog, but the boy stayed away. His head was filled with doubtful thoughts. He imagined that if he had his own blog, he would record a video of So-yeon talking to him. All the time, he was watching her carefully. Suddenly, he noticed that she was also looking at him. He turned away because he felt ashamed and tried to hide it. But he decided to check if she was still looking at him. However, it wasn't like that. It seemed like she wasn't even thinking about him. She was minding her own business and talking to other people. Kang Ji-hoon, the class president, and just a tall, blonde, handsome guy, approached the group. He easily joined the conversation. The main character was upset because he wanted to be able to talk to them as casually. The blogger noticed two estranged guys and went to them, since the guys had not yet introduced themselves for her blog. It was his turn. He introduced himself. His excitement was impossible not to feel. She called the guy cute enough, which made him even more embarrassed. During the interview, Lee Yeon-woo was still distracted by his love. He could not take his eyes off the girl. Lee Yeon-woo watched her every step and understood that he just wanted to be with her all the time. It was time for a group photo, so the whole group of kids gathered together to take a photo. Suddenly, their attention was drawn to the pigeons sitting near the hatch. Lee Yeon-woo noticed how they began to disappear one by one. Something was simply pulling them down, and after them, only bloodstains and feathers remained. The main character noticed that something strange was happening, because the birds began to disappear one by one. Something was simply pulling them inside, and he didn't know what it really was. Another guy approached him, the same headman. The headman asked him to do him a favor, and his friend asked if he knew what loyalty was. The matter was not so urgent and could wait until the hotel. However, all the time, he did not stop thinking about what had happened. Maybe he just imagined it? No one even suspected what was really happening. And the deaths of the pigeons were only the beginning. The class arrived at the hotel. The girl continued to film and filmed this event for the blog. However, the main character did not join them, but sat on the sidelines all the time. He did not stop thinking about what had happened and read the correspondence all the time. He looked at the photo of the girl he liked, and he did not notice at all how other students approached him. He got scared and tried to hide the phone. But it was too late, because the girl saw a familiar face in the picture. The guy couldn't find his place. The girl is a real insider. If she finds out who it was, the whole blog will know about it. And then everyone will know that he is in love and they will start making fun of him. The main character's self-examination was interrupted by the head man. He searched for the guy for a long time and took him to the toilet for a conversation. When he arrived, he opened his briefcase. It was completely filled with soja. Lee Yan-woo screamed in surprise. It was a forbidden drink, so he wanted the main character to carry it onto the bus. After all, then he would become a hero and everyone would respect him. Lee Yan-woo decided to leave, but the guy stopped him. He knew that the girl liked him, so he was going to call her. The hero understood that then they would have a chance to get closer and she would start to respect him. Therefore, this was his perhaps last chance to get closer to her. He didn't want to do it, but he had no other choice, so he just agreed. After a while, the children were supposed to start packing up and leaving. They were supposed to be divided into rooms. At that moment, he started to get very nervous because he was afraid that he might be caught. Kim Joo-byung brought cards, which were also not allowed to be taken with him. He wanted to show them off. However, the main character had something much cooler with him and showed him the drinks, which were very many in his bag. He could not believe his eyes and started screaming. The main character tried to close Kim Joo-byung's mouth, but it was too late because the teacher heard them and wanted to check the bag. The guy was talking to the class teacher. Soya was standing nearby and promised to tell his parents everything so that they would punish him. The broken-hearted boy returned to the room, imagining how angry his parents would be. The head man and his friend were standing there. They started hugging him, although they also managed to carry drinks in their bags. The headman said that they were going to a party with alcohol. The boy asked where it would be. However, they had not decided yet because the teacher was on patrol. The headman replied that now he was a real hero for them. They left him and promised to call after they found a good place. Night came. The hero sat on the edge of the bed. There was no call. Worse was that the place where everyone gathered, his beloved could also be there. He was angry. He was cunningly framed and used as bait to smuggle alcohol. The next day, the excursion continued. The children were going to go to a new place where it was very interesting. But the guy was not cheerful. He still could not forgive such a betrayal. But suddenly, he saw So-yeon in front of him. He heard that she, together with her friends, was talking about yesterday's party, and this meant that she was with them and did not think about him at all. He had already lost hope of talking to her, but suddenly, she herself started talking to him. The girl replied that she had never been on the cable car, and that was where they were going now, and it was a great opportunity to try something new. He couldn't believe his eyes and didn't even know what to say. She also knew that he had been caught yesterday and found the booze, so he became a hero to her. Lee Yan-woo tried to hold back a smile but blushed because it was the first time she had spoken to him. They started driving. He kept standing next to her and watching, looking for opportunities to talk and get closer. A long notification came on the phones warning that there was an outbreak of some kind of virus in Seoul. Like here, a bird crashes into the booth. It was a pigeon that looked quite strange and scary. It made a hole in the glass with its beak. A second later, other pigeons started crashing in one after another. The cabin seemed to be covered in huge white layers. Danger was approaching, but so far, none of the children understood what was really happening. Lee Yan-woo said that it looked like frog eggs that he had seen in the hatch, but no one supported him in this hypothesis. One egg leaked through the glass crack and fell to the floor of the cabin. Everyone was pushing and panicking. A strong crush began. Someone stepped on Lee Yan-woo's foot. He screamed. Turning around, he saw that it was So-yeon. Lee Yan-woo was scared and apologized for his foot. So-yeon was very close. She was holding Lee Yan-woo's back with her hand. She was literally breathing down his neck. Suddenly, the class teacher screamed from behind. She asked her to calm down and stop giving in, otherwise she would be crushed to death. The headmaster's friend stepped forward. He approached the frog's egg closer to take a closer look. When he looked closer, he noticed that the egg was moving. The booth arrived at its destination. The inspectors examined it in shock. The sight was not the best. As soon as the door opened, the children ran out one after another, screaming. Despite the inspector's warnings to go down the stairs carefully, chaos was brewing in the booth. Everyone was shouting, pushing, and shoving, and some refused to come out. But Lee Yan-woo was only thinking about what had happened to him and the girl in the booth. He knew that So-yeon was standing behind him. It was time to talk to her. Who knew when he would get another chance? Lee Yan-woo started apologizing for stepping on her foot. So-yeon didn't let him finish, because the guy was already apologizing for that. His mouth seemed to have a separate life. He rambled on and made a lame joke about the cable car and pigeons. Calling himself an idiot in his head, he pulled himself together and tried to invite So-yeon out for a walk. The girl didn't wait and asked if he was trying to tell her something. This question made the guy panic. Looking into So-yeon's eyes, he gathered his thoughts. The cute, light expression on her face had a calming effect on the boy. He gathered his thoughts and invited So-yeon to go to the observatory together. But the girls' attention shifted to someone's scream. It was their classmate. She was sitting on the floor. A crowd of people had gathered around her, including the class teacher. Her leg was starting to become covered with frog eggs. Like a spider's web, they settled on the girl's body. According to the girl, the virus jumped out of nowhere at her and spread throughout her body. She screamed and beat her leg until someone fell down the stairs. It was the teacher. The girl was shaking and couldn't get up on her own. She gathered around her a crowd of caring people who helped her get up. No one expected to see this. The faces of her classmates showed great surprise and fear. Her pale, once clean face was now covered in white eggs. Her gaze was strange, resembling madness. The controller ran up to Gale. He wanted to help her because the girl was still screaming and shaking like other people. The girl grabbed her rescuer and begged for help. Her gaze, it was full of madness, and her body was becoming more and more covered in white eggs. The mister's hand instantly began to be covered with the virus. The girl was still begging for help. The others, who had not yet managed to leave the booth, watched with horror in their eyes what was happening. The classmates decided to close the booth as quickly as possible so that the virus would not reach them. The headman, who closed the door, held it as hard as he could. The girl asked what was happening, because she heard Gale's screams. The blood ran cold from what she saw. Gale lay in a pile of eggs as if a huge spider wanted to completely wrap her in its web, and she was still alive and in severe pain. The children screamed and panicked, trying to do something, but they understood that they were in a deadly trap from which it was now very difficult to get out alive. Their screams were interrupted by a knock on the glass. It was Gale's hand, or rather, the hand of a monster, white as a corpse, covered in white eggs. The events moved to the entrance to the observatory. There, the class teacher and the security guard were talking about a booked excursion and the route to it. Suddenly, their conversation was interrupted by a sound that sounded like a herd of elephants running past. The teacher turned around in fright. Those were the students who were running out in fright with all their might, screaming. The teacher tried to calm them down and rally them. She was shocked by what was happening, but something else interrupted her attention. It was a student who was lying helplessly under the stairs and shaking. The class teacher rushed to help the girl because she was responsible for the children. Falling to her knees in front of her, the teacher wanted to lift the girl. She asked if she could hear her and asked her to get up. When the child raised her head, the teacher screamed in shock. Her face was clearly filled with wild fear. The girl was unrecognizable. All that was visible was her mouth, begging for help. She was in a lot of pain. The events moved back to the cubicle. The frightened students huddled together and sat on the floor. One of them asked to look at Gale. No one wanted to do this, but still, the boy turned around and saw a terrible picture. Gale's body seemed to be decomposing and rotting alive. The boy screamed and chaos and stampeding began again. After coughing, Lee Yan-woo realized that he had goosebumps all over his body. The way Gale looked could not help but scare him. The boy's attention shifted to So-yeon. She stood next to him, trembling all over. Her expression screamed of not childish fear. When their eyes met, Lee Yan-woo decided to ask if the girl was okay, but she didn't have time to answer. A warning came to the phones about a dangerous virus. There was complete chaos in these areas. Infected people were falling and rolling on the floor. Others were running away. The frightened teenagers read this message and couldn't understand what was happening and what to do. Lee Yan-woo said again that it was because of the frog eggs. But this time, they didn't listen to him either, because they knocked on the glass. Returning, Kang Ji-hoon couldn't believe his eyes. He screamed in fear, which scared the others. Their faces were full of shock. The headmaster fell and held on to the classmates standing nearby. He shouted something about her coming. Turning around, they saw Gale standing like a zombie at the entrance to the cubicle. Everyone screamed. They thought Gale was dead. They started calling her, but she was silent, not raising her head. This picture was driving them crazy. Lee Yan-woo stood closest to everyone. The frightened headmaster, like the last coward, hid at the feet of his classmates and held someone's hand. He told Lee Yan-woo to ask if Gale was okay. The guy was indignant why he had to go, and not someone else. A frightened So-yeon stood next to him. He looked at her and felt that he had to protect the girl. She was trembling with fear and seemed completely defenseless. There was no choice. Lee Yan-woo volunteered to go to Gale. Hesitantly, he uttered a phrase asking if she was okay, but received no answer. Gale stood silently in front of the entrance to the booth. It was heard from the crowd that the zombie girl could hear everything, she just had to ask louder. Gathering her strength, Lee Yan-woo came a little closer and started to ask, but he was interrupted and was not allowed to finish the matter. The phone received another notification about the danger. There was a lot of tension in the booth, and the sound of the notification really scared the teenagers. Lee Yan-woo took out his phone. The message was about the virus again. This time, it had grown even stronger and caused damage to almost all of Seoul. If the guy hadn't tried to pretend to be brave, but he was incredibly afraid to approach Gale. so he breathed a sigh of relief that the notification had arrived. But the joy didn't last long. When it seemed that it couldn't get any worse, Gail raised her head and they met Lee Yun-woo's eyes. Her eyes were white, without pupils. The mascara and eyeliner were smeared around her eyes, which gave the girl a creepy look. The face was covered with ugly white spots. Gail turned to the noise from the stairs. They could hear a group of people running towards the cable car. It seemed that they thought that they would be safer near it. But unfortunately, having risen to the top, they were met with fear in the face. 3 young people stood a meter from the zombie. Seeing them, Gail opened her mouth and hissed at them. It felt like she was torn from reality. It was no longer Gail, it was a monster. The group screamed in fear. They did not understand what was happening on the cable car. Suddenly, something strange happened to Gail. Her balls separated from her body. The girl screamed. It seemed that it was very painful. A mass consisting of eggs attacked the company. The sight was simply terrifying. Gail's skin was peeling off. The classmates were shocked by what they saw. They could not even imagine that such a thing would happen. Meanwhile, a white mass was sticking to the face of one of the boys, although he tried to defend himself. The virus seemed to suck out the boy's face, and the mass became new skin, firmly growing into the body. While everyone was panicking and saying goodbye to life, Lee Yun-woo was staring at the door. The boy understood that this was not Gail. This was a monster, and she hardly wished them well. To protect himself and his friends, Lee Yun-woo went up on his knees so that the zombie would not see him and locked the door. His classmates were surprised by such a heroic act, although some may not have understood why he did it. Lee Yun-woo understood this and began to explain that it was better to close the door so that the monster would not open the door. How a boy was breaking into the door, scared to death. With his screams, he really scared Lee Yun-woo, who was standing right in front of him, on the other side of the door. The boy begged to open the door and let him in. His gaze was terrifyingly scary. But the monster was approaching him. The zombie became even bigger. Gail was there and unrecognizable. The boy began to frantically pull the handle and pray that Lee Yun-woo would open the door. It was a matter of life and death. The classmates huddled in a corner. Only Lee Yun-woo remained in place and pondered what decision to make. He understood that the others were obeying fear. The only one who thought critically was him, so Lee Yun-woo could not put others in danger and did not open the door. At this time, the monster got to the boy and bit his elbow. There was no chance of salvation. Meanwhile, the victim was almost completely swallowed by the monster. That was the boy's last cry before death. It looked like quicksand. The poor thing was being sucked into the mass and he slowly went to the bottom. Lee Yun-woo's body was covered in cold sweat. The blood froze in his veins. They would never forget what happened. It was a nightmare come true. The scariest thing was the monster's face. All that was left of Gail was her beautiful black hair and neat nose. The zombie monster stood up. The girl's poor body was covered in so much mass that she lay on the floor, revealing her bony spine. Lee Yun-woo looked into the monster's eyes. He couldn't believe that Gail was no longer with them. Other tourists were climbing the stairs. Shocked, they began to scream, which greatly attracted the zombie's attention. At that very moment, the monster pounced on them. He found more victims. Silence fell. The stairs were covered in blood mixed with mucus and eggs. The picture resembled the apocalypse. Classmates were sitting in a corner. For a moment, it seemed, that everything was over and the monster was gone. As if, the pigeon on the wall began to move, which attracted the attention of teenagers. The whole class trembled so much that the entire cubicle vibrated. Suddenly, the pigeon screamed loudly. He was considered dead for a long time, just like Gail. Will the nightmare repeat itself? This thought flashed through Lee Yun-woo's mind, which made his face look very scared. One of his classmates shouted why exactly this was happening to them, and the headmaster covered his mouth so that they wouldn't hear her. The class heard some noise from the stairs. Could it be that the monster was returning? They were discussing in whispers what they would do if the zombie monster returned, and they covered the panicking classmate's mouth even harder so that he would be silent. The teenagers looked at the stairs trembling and waited for the monster to return up them. The sounds began to subside and become distant. It seemed that Gail had left. It seemed that the danger had passed. Someone sobbing was heard from behind the cubicle. It was the blogger. The girl was crying because she blamed herself and the whole class. She thought that Gail had disappeared because of them. They could have saved her. The headman Kang Ji-hoon immediately shouted at her. How could she say such a thing? Didn't she see what Gail was doing to the others? He said that if Lee Yun-woo hadn't closed the door, they would all have died long ago. As soon as he had let out a sigh, the main character noticed something. His attention suddenly shifted to the ceiling of the cubicle. He grabbed the hatch at the top and tried to open it. It was good that the boy's height allowed him to reach the ceiling. The class watched in surprise as the boy opened the emergency exit completely. The boy started to climb out, as soon as the headman shouted at him and told him to stop. He didn't understand why he shouldn't climb out of the cubicle. After all, it was unknown what would happen if Gale returned. While she was gone, they had to get out of danger. But the headman insisted on his own and said that they would not be able to escape from her. Lee Yan-woo's attention switched to So-yeon. The girl was shaking, hugging her knees, and her gaze was directed into space. It was clear that she was very scared. Despite this, So-yeon noticed that Lee Yan-woo was staring at her and put him down, which greatly embarrassed the guy. She looked at him and asked if he wanted to tell her something if he was looking at her like that. Of course, this question shocked the guy. Hesitatingly saying her name, he said that he just wanted to know if she was okay. How everyone screamed. They were frightened by the sound coming from the cabin. It turned out that it was just a radio. From it came the voice of a rescuer, asking if anyone was in the cabin. The connection was poor, and the radio could be heard in separate words that barely formed into any logical sentence. But his monologue was interrupted by the sound of the cable car. Everyone looked up. It seemed that something bad had happened. The cable car stopped. The cabin was rocking from side to side from a rather sharp stop. The teenagers were shocked. They did not understand why the cable car stopped, why it did not continue to descend. Suddenly, there was a noise from above again. The sound was like a creak, very sharp and piercing. A miracle happened, because the cable car started moving again and seemed to continue descending. The children's lives seemed to be shortened by several years from such adventures. Finally, they saw the building, and this meant that they were almost in the city. Suddenly, the classmates' faces changed again. As they got closer, they could see that the entire building literally consisted of white mass. There was so much of it that it was leaking from the doors and windows. The teenagers no longer knew whether they wanted to leave the cabin. After all, below, right at the exit from the cable car, monsters were waiting for them, chained to the floor and walls. All the corridors and passages were littered with the bodies of monsters. The fear of approaching was heightened by the fact that the white mass on the building began to move. The teenagers had nowhere to run. It was a good thing the booth was closed. One of the lying monsters began to get up. Perhaps the frog eggs acted as eyes, because how the blind monster noticed the cable car in the distance is not clear. All the teenagers fell to the floor with screams. It felt like they were falling and were about to break, as if there was an accident, as if something had crashed. The cabin collided with the wall and broke. Now the teenagers were not safe in it. Classmates lay unconscious on the floor. Unfortunately, no one could withstand such a shock. Lee Yan-woo was the first to recover. His head was buzzing and cracking badly. Perhaps he had a concussion. The guy was moaning in pain. Other classmates also recovered and everyone started to climb carefully. It seems that there were no casualties and the whole class survived. Kang Ji-hoon said that he felt like he was in hell. Adventure after adventure. Also, his neck hurt unbearably. So-yeon asked what had just happened. Were they really stuck on the cable car? The girl hurt her hand. When she hit, she was thrown against the wall, and the others fell on top of her. She raised her head and was shocked. So-yeon's eyes became wide, and her gaze was very surprised. Behind the door, the girl saw a white mass. It seemed that it was a zombie monster that wanted to get inside them. Unfortunately, the glass shattered upon impact, and the teenagers were in real danger. They had to quickly come up with something to save themselves. So-yeon shouted to the others that the monster was approaching and clearly did not want to be friends with them. The teenagers turned around and screamed in fear, not having time to fully recover from the accident. Suddenly, the zombie monster's hand slammed into the glass. Everything happened like in a horror movie. Lee Yan-woo and Kang Ji-hoon screamed as hard as they could. The monster screamed back, and now not only his hand was hitting the glass, the zombie's whole body was trying to get inside. The teenagers reacted instantly and ran to the other end of the booth as hard as they could. The headman, Kang Ji-hoon, broke the glass of the cabin with his foot out of fear. It seems that he wanted to escape from the other side of the cable car. But at this time, something happened that scared Lee Yan-woo even more. He turned to the sound and screamed very loudly. The monster's entire body fell into the cabin. The teenagers screamed. Lee Yan-woo was again in front and covered everyone with himself. Kang Ji-hoon at this time continued to break the glass. The monster began to get up and scream. It was visible that instead of eyes, there were holes. The headman was very angry and scared. All his aggression was converted into strength, and with one kick, he knocked out all the glass from the cabin, making a passage for escape. The teenagers simply collapsed in a heap on the ground. Everyone was afraid, and most of all, wanted to get out and stay alive. Turning back, one of the classmates saw something in front of him that scared him very much. He shouted for everyone to run away immediately. What the boys saw was a monster approaching their exit. Its white tentacles were already visible to the teenagers, so without thinking, the class ran as fast as they could. They only had time to turn back and see if the zombie monster was catching up with them. Lee Yan-woo screamed because he saw that the zombie had climbed out of the booth and was approaching them. They were lucky that the zombie was quite slow in moving, so the teenagers ran even faster. Unfortunately, So-yeon tripped on the stairs. She was the last one running. It's a good thing Lee Yan-woo noticed this and stopped. He couldn't leave his beloved helpless in danger. He reached out to So-yeon to grab the girl's hand and help her get up. It seems that the girl had sprained her leg. The girl didn't expect such a heroic act from the guy. She was even a little scared at first. Lee Yan-woo noticed that a zombie monster was about to catch up with them, so he quickly grabbed the girl's sleeve to run away. He shouted for the girl to get up faster, otherwise they would be caught up and then death would not be avoided. Meanwhile, the rest of the class had already entered the building and was going down the stairs to the exit. If they had gotten out of this lair, their chances of survival would have been much higher. At the turn, the headman Kang Ji-hoon stopped because he saw something that scared him very much. It was a corridor completely covered with mucus mixed with blood. Other zombie monsters seemed to be rising from the mucus. Others ran up from behind, but the headman stopped them. They couldn't go there to their inevitable death. A plan was needed, but the monsters had already heard them. Some of them began to rise and scream, making themselves known. A classmate saw this and screamed. Adrenaline mixed with fear, and this turbulent mixture spread throughout the body through the blood. At the same time, So-yeon and Lee Yan-woo were still running away. The girl was very scared and didn't want to let the guy go. Suddenly, she stopped and yelped loudly. The girl asked Lee Yan-woo to wait a minute. The guy turned around in confusion and looked at her. He didn't understand what could be so important when it was literally a matter of life and death. But when he lowered his gaze, he was very surprised. Lee Yan-woo saw that So-yeon's leg had turned red in the knee area. The girl was moaning in pain and couldn't keep running at that pace. The guy asked if she was okay. It seemed that So-yeon had been badly injured when she fell down the stairs. Lee Yan-woo started apologizing to the girl because he thought it was all because of him. The girl tried to calm him down because in her opinion it happened when they were running away from the cable car. The girl added that she was very grateful for the guy's help. It was really valuable to her. Of course, the guy blushed at these words, because then he was just doing what he thought he should have. Suddenly, their conversation and a rather cute moment were interrupted by the sound of climbing stairs and a loud scream. It was their classmate. He was running like crazy and shouting to his friends to run away too. Behind him was the headman Kang Ji-hoon. He was shouting at the guy in front to shut up, otherwise he would kill him on the spot. They went up to the floor where Lee Yan-woo was burned with soja. The room looked like it had just been cleaned. The teenagers stood cautiously at the entrance to the room. From previous experience, they were afraid to go in right away, so they first carefully examined everything. Everything looked very safe, which was actually alarming because on the other floors everything was covered in a white mass with zombie monsters. Was this really a chance for salvation? Meanwhile, the monster that had been running after them from the cubicle was crawling up the stairs. He smelled blood and followed the tracks. Like that shark, his appetite became animalistic at the smell of blood. He would soon reach the teenagers. Meanwhile, the class decided to take a breather in the safe room and think about the next plan of action to save them. The girl was able to call her mother. She cried into the phone and said that she didn't know what to do. Kim Joo-byung was scrolling through the news on his phone and said that it was all about monsters on the internet. Warden Kang Ji-hoon told him to call the police, but there was no connection with them. Kim Joo-byung's face changed dramatically, as if some new idea had come to his head, or the boy had heard something strange. Kim Joo-byung went to the windows. Warden Kang Ji-hoon asked where he had gone. There was a parking lot outside the window. The cars were covered in white. As he got closer, Kim Joo-byung saw that some drivers were trying to get out of the car, but it was too late because they had also fallen victim to the mutants. Meanwhile, Lee Yan-woo also called his worried mother. He said that he was in the cable car building on the second floor and could not get out of there. But suddenly, the boy's attention shifted to So-yeon's scream of pain. His girlfriend tried to provide So-yeon with first aid as much as possible in the conditions of the apocalypse. Lee Yan-woo watched what was happening from under his cap. Suddenly, Lee Yan-woo's admiration was interrupted by another classmate who pushed the boy and asked if he had any change or coins. Kim Joo-byung wanted to use the vending machine with snacks, but he didn't have any change with him. The boy asked Lee Yan-woo if he wanted anything but was refused. Kim Joo-byung was shaking badly. He seemed to be overcome by some kind of fever. Lee Yan-woo noticed his friend's condition and asked if he was okay, to which he got a tantrum in response. The boy felt bad. Not everyone could remain calm in such a dangerous situation. Kim Joo-byung started cursing the day he came on this school trip. The boy continued to monologue about how bad he felt. However, Lee Yan-woo's thoughts were interrupted by the fact that he really thought he was going to die. Suddenly, the boy's attention shifted back to the floor. It seemed that the boy had noticed something strange and dangerous again. Looking closer, Lee Yan-woo noticed traces of blood on the floor. It was So-yeon's blood, and the drops led straight to the second floor where the teenagers were hiding. Lee Yan-woo followed these traces and concluded that the girl was sad. As he walked further, the boy realized that So-yeon had bled all the way to the shelter, leaving traces behind her. When the boy went out into the corridor, he saw a white mass of mucus blocking his path. Looking up, the boy turned pale. He saw something terrible in front of him. What the boy saw was a huge white zombie monster standing a few meters away from him and breathing literally in his face. The boy froze in fear, although he had to act immediately and run away. Time was running out. The situation was critically dangerous. At the same second, the monster suddenly pounced on the boy with its entire ugly white body. Meanwhile, on the second floor, the teenagers screamed in fear. It seems that they saw what happened to Lee Yan-woo. Fortunately, the boy managed to dodge the monster. The young man reacted quickly enough, but the zombie monster entered the room where the teenagers were hiding and fell to the floor. Turning his head, Lee Yan-woo screamed in fear. The boy probably thought he was going to die, but the ugly appearance of the monster up close was no less frightening. Without thinking twice, the teenagers began to run away screaming as hard as they could. The monster got up and also ran after them. The zombie slowly and very hard got to its feet. Its white, sticky mass stuck to the floor, which hindered its movements. This gave the teenagers a little head start, so they had time to escape and find new shelter. The zombie monster roared, making itself known. He seemed to be saying that even if they didn't run and hide from him well, he would still find them. The monster launched its tentacles at the boy who ran last. It seemed to be Lee Yan-woo. Its ugly, evil white paws almost reached the boy's leg. If he grabbed his leg, there would be trouble. Meanwhile, the headman Kang Ji-hoon and his friend almost ran out of the second floor and were looking for a way out. The last of the company was So-yeon. However, she noticed something that made her stop. She noticed a zombie monster approaching her. He could smell the girl's blood, and therefore, she was a tasty morsel for him. Meanwhile, Lee Yan-woo managed to catch up and even overtake the company. He and Kim Ju-byung almost reached the exit door. Behind them ran the guys Kang Ji-hoon and Kang Min. They shouted after them not to close the door. Having reached the exit, the guys attacked Lee Yan-woo and his friend with their fists, although they did not have time to close the door. However, Kim Ju-byung did not stop and ran up the stairs. It seems that the guy was very scared. Having reached the end, the guy stopped to take a breath and rest. Just then, he heard someone swearing at him loudly from behind him. He turned around to see who was scared. Before he could turn around, the class president Kang Ji-hoon attacked him and started cursing and choking him. Kim Ju-byung started making excuses and begging the president to listen to him. Lee Yan-woo tried to separate the boys, otherwise Ji-hoon would really just kill the boy. The president had problems controlling his emotions. Suddenly they saw something. This stopped the fight for a while and they forgot that they wanted to kill each other. On the floor, they saw the cable car that they had come down from earlier. They did not expect to see it, because it was a completely different floor. Each floor is connected to an entrance and exit for safe exit in case of emergency. So the teenagers just went around the circle. Meanwhile, a gasping girl came running up the stairs to them. The girl frightened the headman with her screams. It felt like she was about to cry. It was obvious that something terrible had happened. The main character asked if she was okay, sensing the girl's condition. However, she couldn't say a word, she just kept moaning loudly. The teenagers turned to the stairs to wait for the rest of the girls to come running. So-yeon stood panting, pressed against the wall and breathing nervously, but very quietly, trying to calm down somehow. A monster was standing behind her. He didn't see her because the girl had hidden behind the wall. She understood that she could die right now. At this time, her friend called out to So-yeon. She was looking for her all over the floor. Turning her head, she finally found her friend. The girls were talking in whispers so that the zombie monster wouldn't hear them. They had to figure out how to escape. The others had already escaped, so the only hope was in themselves. The girls were a few steps from the door. If they ran quickly, there was a chance of salvation, because the monster would find them sooner or later. However, So-yeon didn't think so. She wanted to stay there. The girl's wound was dampening her fighting spirit. She was afraid that she wouldn't be able to cope. They thought that the monster couldn't see them, so they had to hide until it left. The girl's leg was still bleeding and hurting very badly. Meanwhile, the zombie monster just stood there and sniffed out where its victims were. Meanwhile, the boys were already going down to the second floor to see where the girls were and what had happened to them that they hadn't run after them. At first, they didn't see anything, so they were very surprised where So-yeon and the other girl had run to. Elder Kang Ji-hoon asked the others where they were, because he couldn't see them. Lee Yan-woo was the first to notice the girls, and he told the others about it. What he saw shocked the boy. They only saw So-yeon, who was hiding behind the wall. The girl was still covering her mouth with her hands, so that the zombie monster wouldn't hear them. Lee Yan-woo noticed this and understood what was going on. His face changed very dramatically, because he saw something that scared him. Lee Yan-woo saw that there was a monster standing right behind the girls. It seemed that he smelled the blood of So-yeon, who he had been chasing for so long. The girl covered her mouth even more with her hands. Her eyes widened greatly, as if she had seen something very terrible. And so it was. So-yeon saw the monster's reflection in the window in front of her. She hoped that the zombie wasn't that smart and wouldn't look out the window. But her hopes were in vain. The girl barely managed to look away when she realized what was going to happen. The monster screamed from the corner of the wall. This scream was like a victory cry, as if the zombie monster was proud that he had finally found his victim. The girl froze. So-yeon couldn't even lift a finger from fear, although she had to act immediately. The monster roared loudly again and wanted to attack and bite the girl. Just then, Lee Yeon-woo ran into the room and screamed at the zombie monster, thereby distracting his attention from the girls So-yeon and Hong-mi. The monster stopped and analyzed what was happening. Lee Yeon-woo ran screaming to the second floor, making more noise so that the zombie monster would hear and switch to the boy. And the young man succeeded because the monster immediately noticed Lee Yeon-woo. The monster ran after the boy. Now, Lee Yeon-woo had to think of a place to run to protect himself and his classmates from danger. The boy ran as fast as he could, not even having time to turn around. It seemed that Lee Yeon-woo already regretted his action, but there was no turning back. He had to run away from the zombie monster. So-yeon watched what was happening. She saw that her savior, Lee Yeon-woo, appeared on the floor, and a zombie monster ran after him. At this time, the guy ran up the stairs, very professionally avoiding the white slime on the floor. Lee Yeon-woo decided to turn back. The guy was very scared by what he saw, which gave him strength to run even faster because dying was not in his plans. The monster was exactly half a floor behind him, but he was confidently catching up. He was not that slow either, as if the guy's fear was fueling him. Lee Yeon-woo managed to turn around. The zombie monster was not so agile, which gave the guy a little advantage. Having climbed up, the boy finally saw the open door. It was the exit. The boy made a circle and ran out to the cable car, but from the other side. Lee Yeon-woo decides to close the door behind him. He thought that this would stop the monster for a while. The boy looks at the closed door and expects what will happen now. Lee Yeon-woo had some time to gasp. He thought that the zombie monster had stopped chasing him. The boy began to quietly descend the stairs at a calm pace, as if a huge white monster had just chased him. As he descended, the boy thought about everything that had happened. He couldn't believe that he had committed such a crazy, reckless act. Having reached the floor where the girls were hiding, he called out to his classmates and quickened his pace to a run. But to his surprise, the hall was completely empty, and no one responded to the boy. Lee Yeon-woo was scared. The boy stood silently in a stupor, not knowing what to expect or where to go next. He saw a broken pot with some kind of plant, and a broken window nearby. Coming closer and looking out the window, he saw something. Outside the window, his classmates were running on the roof of the building. They got out, but did not wait for him, not even So-yeon, whom he saved from imminent death. He watched with sadness in his eyes as the teenagers ran away. Did they really think that Lee Yeon-woo had been devoured by a monster and that they should also run away from him? The classmates were descending from the roof of the entrance to the building one by one. It was quite high. So-yeon was the last to descend. The girl noticed Lee Yeon-woo in the window. The headman Kang Ji-hoon gave the girl his hand and shouted that she should not be distracted and go down faster. It is not clear why they are running away. How come a zombie monster appeared from nowhere behind her? It turned out that his classmates were running away from him. How could he catch up with them so quickly? Lee Yeon-woo silently watched what was happening. He wouldn't have time to catch up with his friends. Is this really the end? And now it's every man for himself. In the end, he just called out to his classmates once more. It seems that Lee Yeon-woo didn't see that they were running away from the monster or thought that it was another zombie. But the boy didn't give up. He ran to the exit. He had to get out of the building. He ran to the hole in the glass that his classmates had made and stopped abruptly. The boy saw a huge zombie monster that was probably chasing his classmates. It seems that Lee Yeon-woo can't get out of this trap easily. He looked at the scene outside in horror and didn't understand what to do now. His classmates left him here alone in this damn trap. There was only one question in the boy's head that remained unanswered. Why did they abandon him? With or without them, Lee Yeon-woo had to somehow get out and save his life. He started to climb out of the hole in the glass that his classmates had made. But something stopped him. It was something he saw outside. After all, there was no one there. His classmates had left. The boy quickly took out his phone and started typing a message to someone. Lee Yeon-woo wrote in the class's group chat that he had stayed in the building, hoping that they would come back for him. He found Kang Min in his contacts. But then the phone rang abruptly. The boy thought it was Kang Min. Lee Yeon-woo started talking into the phone, calling for help, but no one answered. Suddenly, something rang from the phone again, which scared the boy very much. The already scared boy screamed in fear. He went to the toilet. He opened the door. There were no monsters. He could breathe a sigh of relief. Opening the door, he couldn't believe his eyes. A rather familiar voice could be heard from one of the booths, constantly complaining and hardly crying. It turned out to be his friend Kim Joo-byung. He couldn't duck out of the window and was left alone in the building. It seems that the guy was scolding himself for his weakness, because now he would most likely die in a building filled with zombie monsters. Lee Yun-woo knocked on the booth and called Kim Joo-byung, which greatly frightened his friend, who was already mentally preparing for death. But Kim Joo-byung didn't answer. So Lee Yun-woo knocked again and called his friend. Now there were two of them, so it would be easier to get out. In the end, Kim Joo-byung responded to Lee Yun-woo's words because he finally recognized the guy by his voice. The friend opened the door of the cubicle that served as his hiding place and asked in surprise what Lee Yun-woo was doing there. Kim Joo-byung couldn't believe his eyes. He looked at his friend and noticed that he was crying. The guy started to mock Lee Yun-woo, saying that he was a loser and crying. After all, real men never cry. In response, Lee Yun-woo started yelling at his friend that he had been dumped too, and who else was a loser. Kim Joo-byung retaliated by yelling back that his friend was a jerk and that he had dumped his classmates because they were bothering him. But there wasn't much time for tenderness. They had to get out of the building. He called out to his friend Kim Joo-byung to come out of the cubicle and they would get out together. Kim Joo-byung didn't like the idea. He said it was better to just close the door and stay inside. Lee Yun-woo suggested another method, just run away. Kim Joo-byung insisted that his friend go and close the door, because hell could happen again. The boy stopped. Something caught his attention. A frightened Juben ran up to Lee Yun-woo. He nervously asked what happened there and how his classmates escaped. Lee Yun-woo said that he knew how they escaped, and showed him where his classmates had run. The boy's mind replayed those moments of the class's escape. It hurt him a lot. He remembered So-yeon's last look, although he was surprisingly quite scared. She saw him in the window, but didn't stop, and continued to run, although he had saved her life twice. Meanwhile, Kim Joo-byung continued to complain about his classmates. He said that they had abandoned them as if the boys were an empty place, and that they can no longer call them friends. But Lee Yun-woo interrupted his friend's monologue. He asked why Kim Joo-byung didn't go with them. Kim Joo-byung started to make excuses that everything was wrong and that he was right. It was Lee Yun-woo who was the jerk, not him. The guys sat silently alone in the corner of the second floor. Kim Joo-byung interrupted the deathly silence. He asked how long they had to stay in the building in this state. The guy asked if Lee Yun-woo wasn't hungry. It's unclear how long they've been waiting here. It turned out that the guy was looking at his phone. There was a call to the police on it, but there was still no connection. Kim Joo-byung was surprised that his friend was still calling the security service. It was obviously not the first call in an hour. However, Lee Yun-woo reassured his friend that his parents had almost arrived to help them. But Jae-bin was not reassured at all. After all, nothing would change if Lee Yun-woo's parents arrived. There was no way out of the building. The boy's phone received a message from his mother asking him to watch the news. After all, the situation is really scary, and it is better for the boys not to go out and stay in the building. His mother also sent a link to a news video. Lee Yun-woo opened it and started watching the video. It said that in some areas of Seoul, cells of an unknown virus had appeared. The government declared an extremely dangerous disaster zone. The boys were in the epicenter of the events. This meant that the boys could not get out of here. They were locked in, and it was not clear when they would come to rescue them, or if they would come at all. Kim Joo-byung's mood noticeably worsened. Lee Yun-woo noticed this and asked if he was okay, to which the boy asked him to be quiet, holding his head. Suddenly the boy heard something. He raised his head to see what was happening outside the window. They were fire engines. There were several of them. Will they finally be saved and this nightmare will end? Lee Yun-woo asked Kim Joo-byung if it was fire engines that had arrived. Kim Joo-byung was in a pessimistic mood. He said that the firefighters had not come to save them. But Lee Yun-woo's attention was diverted to the fire that had broken out in the neighboring building. It seemed that no one was really going to save them. The guy got up and went somewhere. When Kim Joo-byung asked him, he replied that he needed a trash can, but his friend still didn't understand what he needed it for. Lee Yun-woo said that it was a good idea and worth trying, but Kim Joo-byung didn't understand what his friend was talking about or what kind of idea it was. The guy said that it was worth trying to start a fire. Maybe then the firefighters would come to save them. Kim Joo-byung didn't like this idea. Although he suggested it, it wasn't serious. Lee Yun-woo began to carefully search the room for a trash can. Finally, the boy found it and started running to find a lighter and set it on fire. Kim Joo-byung stood behind and couldn't believe that his friend Lee Yun-woo really wanted to do this. The boy put his hand in the ugly trash can full of all kinds of scraps and leftovers in search of a lighter. Lee Yun-woo even turned on the flashlight on his phone to see everything better and make sure he didn't miss what he was looking for. Kim Joo-byung didn't stop yelling at his friend. He still didn't believe that Lee Yun-woo wanted to set the place on fire. But the guy was convinced that if there was a fire, they would definitely come to put it out. Suddenly, Kim Joo-byung's face changed dramatically and turned pale. It seemed that he saw something he didn't want to see. Kim Joo-byung saw a zombie monster in the door who couldn't get out. Had they really been in the same room all this time? Lee Yan-woo also leaned over the wall to see what had shocked and scared his friend so much. The boy's face immediately changed. Looking closer, they noticed that the zombie monster was still outside the door, but most likely heading towards them. They needed a new plan for salvation. The events moved to the Seoul highway. There was a huge traffic jam there because the roads were blocked. The news showed this highway and said that the government was focused on preventing the spread of the virus. This was the news that Lee Yan-woo's mother was reading on her phone on the way to him. She screamed in horror and told her husband that it seemed that the situation was much worse than they thought. They drove up to the road and stopped because the highway was blocked. Each car was checked by a checkpoint. At this time, Lee Yan-woo's pocket was ringing and vibrating loudly, but the boy couldn't get distracted because the monster could hear. Fortunately, the zombie monster was still standing at the door. The boys had time to come up with a plan. But suddenly, Lee Yan-woo's face changed dramatically. He opened his mouth and wanted to scream, but he held back. It seemed that something scared him. In the end, the boy said that he didn't think the zombie monster was going to come in. And indeed, the zombie monster was standing calmly at the entrance. Kim Joo-byung began to panic and complain about how scared he was when he saw the monster. He appeared very suddenly. Lee Yan-woo supported the boy in this, but the boy told his friend Kim Joo-byung that he thought the monster was getting bigger. Lee Yan-woo continued that the white things on his face looked like frog eggs as the zombie monster roared. Kim Joo-byung was very scared and screamed, hoping that the monster didn't hear him. Kim Joo-byung barked and started making sounds like vomiting. Lee Yan-woo asked if his friend was okay. The boy looked at the almost empty lighter in his hand and started thinking about a plan of action for him and Kim Joo-byung to save him. Lee Yan-woo looked at his friend, who was panting and scared to death, and asked him if he thought everything would be okay. The events moved to the cable car. Everything there was covered in mucus mixed with frog eggs. Suddenly, Lee Yan-woo jumped out quietly from the back of the cabin like a ninja. He landed. He looked around the room in the cable car. The guy also looked to see if the monster was still standing there without moving. Everything was fine. It was time to act immediately. Meanwhile, Kim Joo-byung stood on the platform and watched the zombie monster, although he himself was afraid to even breathe next to him. The guys met and sat on the stairs. Kim Joo-byung asked what they should do then. Lee Yan-woo suggested going to the 3rd floor. It seemed like the guy had a plan. The gist of the plan was that there was one entrance and one exit on each floor. The guys were on the 2nd floor. So while one would distract the monster at the entrance, the other would go up and start a fire on the 3rd floor. Since the cable car was outside, the sprinkler wouldn't be able to put out the fire. Kim Joo-byung asked who would go up. Lee Yan-woo's plan seemed quite reliable to him, so he had no objections. The guys looked at each other and silently agreed who would go up to start a fire. Kim Joo-byung stayed to distract the mob monster. The guy was already feeling sorry for and cursing Lee Yan-woo. After all, his friend would definitely brag to others later that he was the one who went upstairs. Meanwhile, Lee Yan-woo reached the 3rd floor. The lighter worked surprisingly well. The guys were lucky. Suddenly, something distracted the rescuer. He heard some strange sounds. The guy raised his head to look around, but nothing was visible. Kim Joo-byung had to worry about it, so Lee Yan-woo didn't get distracted anymore. He said about himself that he believed in his friend. He had to believe in him and finish his job. There's just a little left, and salvation is just around the corner. Lee Yan-woo takes a piece of paper from his briefcase and sets it on fire. The next in line was the bag. The boy was getting more and more happy. What he was getting out of it gave him confidence. But the joy did not last long. The boy was not allowed to finish the job because suddenly, out of nowhere, a monster appeared. Lee Yan-woo was just setting fire. Just then, he heard the familiar growl of a zombie monster. The giant climbed out of the roof of the cabin. Its mouth was open as if preparing to bite. The boy, seeing this, immediately rushed to run away as fast as he could. He did not understand if it was the same monster that was on the 2nd floor or a different one, and now there were 2 of them chasing the boys. The monster jumped out of the booth and roared, which greatly frightened the boy and gave him even more strength and motivation to escape. However, Lee Yan-woo could not break away from the zombie monster. The giant was literally breathing on his back, but this did not stop the boy, and he continued to run. The giant monster released white, ugly tentacles from its mouth so that they would catch up with Lee Yan-woo. The boy screamed. He did not expect to meet the monster because he was hoping for a friend. His plan was almost perfect. In the hands of the young man was a piece of paper which he managed to light. Without thinking twice, the boy threw it to the monster right into its ugly tentacles. This gave the brave man a little head start, and he was able to break away from the zombie monster. Lee Yan-woo was a few steps away from the exit. The guy turned around to see how far he was from the monster, but what happened shocked Lee Yan-woo very much. He saw that such a huge and strong zombie monster began to burn. He was afraid of fire. The guy stopped and watched what would happen next. It was a hope for salvation and at least some minimal safety. The monster burned completely. It turned out to be flammable, even though it was created from wet frog eggs. Lee Yan-woo did not move. He stood silently in surprise and contemplated this picture. Just now, he found a way to kill this virus. Suddenly, the boy's phone rang. Someone was calling him. It was his friend. Lee Yan-woo immediately started bragging that he had killed the monster and it had burned alive. But his friend was very loudly ordering the boy to come down. It seemed that something had happened. The friend didn't understand why. Lee Yan-woo explained that when he was lighting a fire, the monster attacked him, but he was able to set it on fire. Everything got so hot that the fire blocked Lee Yan-woo's exit. He didn't think about this when he was running away from the monster, but there was no other option. Either him or him. Lee Yan-woo ran to the scene of the fire and made sure once again that he couldn't get through there. The fire was getting worse and worse, and there was nothing to put it out. The boy asked what he should do. His friend shouted at him, called him an idiot, and ordered him to go down as quickly as possible because he had little time left. Lee Yan-woo heard something behind him and turned around. However, the boy did not see anything at all. Everything was empty, except for some gaps of mucus on the floor, ceiling, and walls. Suddenly, another monster crawled out from around the corner. It seemed that it was the one his friend was following. However, there was nowhere to run. Behind the boy was a fire, and in front was a giant monster that wanted to eat him. There were even more such monsters at the top. Meanwhile, the fire was starting to spread. The smoke was getting thicker. Lee Yan-woo had to choose which danger was safer at that moment. The guy decides to take off his jacket. It seems he has a new plan. The monster is getting closer and closer, but Lee Yan-woo is not going to run away. The guy set his hoodie on fire. The monster attacked Lee Yan-woo. Its mouth was about to reach the guy. The young man swung and threw this Molotov cocktail at the zombie monster with all his strength. Now it was necessary to run away. The fire became even stronger. It was becoming increasingly difficult for the guy to breathe. The guy wanted to escape so much that he forgot to throw away his hoodie and ran with it anyway. The monster's face was grim. It seemed to be melting and melting before his eyes. The guy understood that fire was his weakness, so he needed to burn this disgusting zombie monster too. While the monster was moving away from the last portion of fire, Lee Yan-woo swung with all his strength and threw a burning sweatshirt at the reptile. The sweatshirt fell nearby. A little more and the monster would have caught fire. Shocked, Lee Yan-woo stood in a stupor. He had already exhaled with hope as here, through the wind of his life again, one step away from death. The monster saw that he was safe and roared angrily at the boy. Now the giant zombie giant had a new goal. He had to take revenge on the boy for setting him on fire. Lee Yan-woo covered his face with his hands. He understood that he had nowhere to run. As here, a burning piece of paper flew out of nowhere. It was unreal luck. The arson flew straight at the monster. He had not yet had time to attack the boy, so Lee Yan-woo was saved. The boy got up. He should have been dead already, so he hadn't fully recovered and understood what was going on. It was his friend. He ran scared into danger, swearing and throwing burning paper to save his friend. The guy made another move and threw another arson at the monster. Fierce hatred and fear were visible in the guy's eyes. He revived the main character, screaming at him and telling him to run away immediately. Lee Yan-woo did just that. After all, this monster was twice as big as the previous one, so 2 arson attacks didn't take much of his strength away. The guys quickly went down the stairs. The main thing is that the monster doesn't run after them and the second floor doesn't start to burn. The guys ran away screaming as hard as they could. Now they had 2 dangers, the monster and the fire, which was getting stronger and stronger. His friend ran first. He was not as brave as his friend, so the adrenaline in his blood hindered him. Because of this, the boy did not notice a piece of white slime in front of him. If he stepped on it, he would also turn into a monster and most likely burn in this building. Kim Zubin did not want to die, so he stopped in front of the slime. But the coordination of movements was broken, so the boy simply fell face down the stairs. Lee Yan-woo saw this and ran to help his friend. For his salvation, he pledged his life to Zubin. The guy landed on his hands surprisingly. It seemed like he hadn't hit anything, but in front of him was another bunch of white dangerous virus. Luckily, he landed right in front of this bunch so he didn't get infected and turn into a big ugly monster. The guy got up but couldn't coordinate and started to fall. Luckily, Lee Yan-woo ran up to him and caught his friend. However, the guy's reaction was not friendly. He pushed the guy's hand away and told him to get away from him. Lee Yan-woo didn't understand why his friend was so angry. His eyes were burning with anger. He was really angry. The guy continued to scream. He called Lee Yan-woo a brat who imagined himself a hero but couldn't set fire properly and ruined everything. If only Lee Yan-woo had listened to Zubin, all this wouldn't have happened. He added that the guy was a brat and nothing else. Lee Yan-woo was shocked. He didn't expect to hear that from his friend. Lee Yan-woo shouted back and elbowed the guy. Now the guy spoke. He shouted back at his friend. Did he really want to die? Lee Yan-woo asked why he was angry with him, because the guy wasn't to blame for the monster attacking them all. He called him a bastard again. His friend's words really hurt the guy. So now he was burning with rage. Zubin couldn't accept his weaknesses. Lee Yan-woo was blown away. The words kept pouring out of his mouth, stinging his friend like a bee. The friend called Lee Yan-woo a brat and asked him if he thought he had been abandoned. The guy started making excuses that he was just a little late and that was all. But he didn't believe him. The guys were about to beat each other up. As if this were the case, Lee Yan-woo noticed something that changed his expression. The other one had already returned. They couldn't believe what they were seeing. Another monster was roaring at them from the floor below. It was sucked into a pile of slime that was simply spread out on the floor. The guys screamed at what they saw. They immediately forgot about the quarrel. Now the most important thing was to escape and save their lives. The monster pounced on them, swimming away from the ground like a frog. But at this time, the guys were already running away as hard as they could, barely managing to turn around and see what was happening behind them. Lee Yan-woo ran last, so he managed to close the door behind him. The monster remained outside. The door was closed, so the monster definitely couldn't get inside to the guys. Suddenly, the guys' faces changed and they screamed in unison. The monster's tentacles began to crawl through the door and attack the guys. The two friends started to run, but there was nowhere to run. They had to come up with a new plan. The guy attacked Lee Yan-woo again, accusing him of saying that the monster couldn't get through the closed door. They turned to look at the monster and saw that more and more of it was crawling inside. The guys froze in confusion again. It seemed that they had seen something shocking in front of them. Behind the door was a bunch of monsters, chained to the ground with white, disgusting mucus. They couldn't get out. The guys were trapped. Lee Yan-woo screamed as hard as he could. He didn't understand what was happening. What kind of apocalypse was happening in this building? Suddenly, something squeaked loudly, which scared the guys very much. Zubin jumped on the spot in fear. The guys turned to the sound. Something on the wall made a terrible, piercingly loud sound, similar to an alarm. It turned out to be a fire alarm. It seemed that the boys' plan had begun to work. Realizing that it was just an alarm, the boys calmed down. However, something scared the boys again when they turned their heads in the other direction. Lee Yan-woo saw that thick black smoke was coming from the third floor. It seemed that the fire had spread seriously. However, Lee Yan-woo took out a lighter from his pocket and tried to light it. The boy said that he would try his best to light another flame. Meanwhile, the zombie monster's body had almost completely penetrated inside. Only its legs remained outside the door. There was little time. He tried to light the fire as quickly as possible. The boy shouted at the lighter to make it work. The young man's heart was beating wildly. He had to act quickly to save his life. Lee Yan-woo begged the lighter to give at least a small flash of fire, continuing to nervously light it again and again. The friend ran up to the boy. He asked if they had time for this and brought some paper that looked like a newspaper in his hands. Now Lee Yan-woo and he were shouting and cursing at the lighter together because it wouldn't work. Suddenly his face changed dramatically as if the boy had seen something very terrible. Lee Yan-woo, seeing his appearance, turned his head and screamed. His friend started to run away. It turned out that behind the boys, there was a hole in the window, through which their classmates were escaping. Lee Yan-woo fell on his friend in fear and screamed. There was nowhere to run. They had to quickly figure out what to do. Meanwhile, the monster slowly but surely climbed the wall and climbed through the window inside. These monsters never cease to amaze. Lee Yan-woo screamed even louder. He couldn't believe that zombie monsters were capable of such a thing. Suddenly, from behind the boy, his friend's victorious scream was heard. He ran and was clearly heading towards the monster. In the hands of the fearless friend was a pot. Lee Yan-woo could not understand what Zubin was trying to do. He swung, screamed, and threw a pot with a plant at the monster. The flower pot flew clearly to the target, right into the zombie monster's head. The pot broke, making a loud crashing sound, and underneath it lay the monster sprawled. It looked like it was dead. The boy screamed. Lee Yan-woo couldn't yet analyze what had just happened. Under the pot, mixed with the ground, was a white slime that looked like blood. The boys couldn't believe that the zombie monster was really dead. He turned to his friend and started bragging. He said that Lee Yan-woo should take back what he said about him. As if this were the case, Lee Yan-woo's face changed dramatically. The boy's mouth opened wide, and his eyes looked like two healthy oranges. The boy asked why his friend had stopped praising him. However, the boy did not see that behind him. Covered in dirt and with a pot on his head, a zombie monster was rising, seemingly not dead. Lee Yan-woo shouted for him to turn back. He was so worried about his friend because the zombie monster was a step away from the boy. When the boy turned his head, the huge monster had already managed to get up and roar. It seemed that he was very angry with the boy's action and wanted revenge. Unfortunately, he did not have time to react, and the monster managed to attack before the boys started running away. Li Yan-woo fell to the ground from behind. He watched as the monster ate his friend and could not do anything. All Li Yan-woo had was a lighter. He nervously tried to light it. It was a matter of life and death, and the lighter was the last hope. The boy was screaming and cursing at the lighter because it wasn't working. He looked at his friend who was almost completely eaten by the monster. Li Yan-woo felt so sorry for his friend. If he set the monster on fire, his friend would burn too, but it was worth trying. There was no other way. Li Yan-woo shouted his friend's name, as if letting him know that he was there and trying to save Kim Joo-byung. Meanwhile, the zombie monster had already reached the boy's face. Was this really the end? Li Yan-woo, seeing this picture, nervously lit the lighter again and again. Kim Joo-byung's face began to turn white. Frog eggs like pimples appeared on his face. The last thing Kim Joo-byung said was a plea for help. The boy saw this and screamed. He felt so helpless and guilty for what had happened. Kim Joo-byung's body began to merge into one with the zombie monster. The boy could no longer speak, only hummed. It seemed to be very painful. Li Yan-woo did not give up and continued to light the lighter. It was supposed to give off a flame. It is like a stone rolling on water. Suddenly, the lighter finally gave off the long-awaited flame. Hope for salvation returned again. Li Yan-woo just had to think of how exactly he should save his friend. But the joy did not last long. The boy heard strange, familiar screams. He raised his head and couldn't believe his eyes. A zombie monster entered the room, which Li Yan-woo had already forgotten about, busy saving his friend Kim Joo-byung. But the monster didn't forget. All this time, it had been crawling through the door little by little, and now it was heading towards Li Yan-woo to eat him. But Li Yan-woo didn't give up and began to react and act quickly. He lit a pot of plants lying nearby, hoping that the monster would also catch fire in this way. Fortunately, that's what happened, and the monster caught fire. Li Yan-woo's chances of saving his friend Kim Joo-byung increased. Now he had to deal with his monster. The earth monster quickly caught fire. He screamed in pain. His huge mouth finally detached itself from Kim Joo-byung. Meanwhile, the boy was hanging on the tentacles of the burning zombie monster. It seemed that he began to peel off from him a little bit, and it was unknown whether Kim Joo-byung would get infected. At this time, Li Yan-woo attacked his zombie monster with screams. The boy shouted for him to get out of here because he did not belong here. Li Yan-woo swung at him with a burning piece of newspaper that Kim Joo-byung gave him. The monster at this time managed to jump out at the boy. He had to deal with this monster first. Li Yan-woo swung again, shouting a death wish at the monster. This gave him confidence in what was happening. The boy ran up to the monster. He was making a decisive blow that was supposed to set the monster on fire and kill it. With the words "go to hell," Li Yan-woo pounced on the giant. The zombie monster was flying at the boy. His left side was already a little hot from the fire that was about to reach the giant. But this did not stop the monster. He continued to attack. His huge, ugly mouth was about to grab the poor but brave Li Yan-woo. The boy was very surprised. He thought that zombie monsters were afraid of fire. Li Yan-woo expected the giant to get scared and fall behind the boy, but the boy didn't stop. The boy's attack burned the zombie giant. It seemed that Li Yan-woo didn't want to waste all his fire on this ugly, disgusting monster. Meanwhile, his friend Kim Joo-byung was still lying unconscious next to the burning zombie monster. Li Yan-woo immediately remembered him and thought of how to help him. He had to carefully take Kim Joo-byung away from the flames. Looking closer, he saw that Kim Joo-byung was all injured and covered in frog eggs in places. The boy wasn't breathing. Li Yan-woo fell to the floor and screamed. It seemed that his friend could not be saved. The boy cried. Li Yan-woo looked at this terrible picture and kept apologizing, hoping that Kim Joo-byung heard him and that it would make his death at least a little easier. Li Yan-woo started hysterical. Tears were pouring from his eyes. He felt very sorry for his friend. He felt so helpless at that moment. Kim Joo-byung saved his life, but Li Yan-woo couldn't. His friend's body burst into flames. No one had ever managed to escape from the monster's mouth. Li Yan-woo sat and trembled and looked at Kim Joo-byung in his last minutes. His soul was empty. Suddenly, several more giant monsters stuck to the glass the boy was sitting next to. The guy got up and started running backwards. He looked at this picture and didn't believe that anything worse could happen. Wasn't Li Yan-woo really hurt enough? One of the monsters screamed from behind the glass, making himself known. He saw Li Yan-woo, and now his goal was to grab the guy and kill him. The guy turned to the side at some strange sound and was terrified. A whole army of huge, ugly zombie monsters was approaching him. The guy wasn't sure he could handle them alone, but he had to. He had to act quickly and wisely. He had almost no options for escape because 2 floors were burning and emitting black smoke. The zombie monsters were approaching the guy. It seems that the previous one, when he crawled through the door, opened it. Meanwhile, all of Seoul was covered in white mucus and frog eggs. It felt like it was a spider's den during the mating season. The events were transferred to the bus on which the teenagers arrived for this ill-fated excursion, which unexpectedly turned into hell for everyone. A blogger was sitting on one of the seats, and she greeted everyone. It turned out that the girl had turned on the camera and started her video blog. She continued that they had barely escaped and were currently hiding in the bus. There were a lot of them near the cable car. From behind, the headman Kang Ji-hoon got up and shouted at the girl. A friend wrote in the live chat. He added that his neighborhood was also in a bad mood right now. Then the observer asked if it was normal for Hongmi to go live now. Hongmi continued to say that it was a regular school trip to Seoul. At first, all the students were in class. But unfortunately, only a small number managed to survive. In the back, sitting alone, was So-yeon. She didn't want to talk to anyone or do a live broadcast. Meanwhile, in the chat, the girl was going to tell something interesting. The subscriber said that if you look at the cells, you can see the nucleus. The subscriber added that he saw it on YouTube. The subscriber said that he didn't live in Seoul, but according to the news, they had just been told to come to a temporary shelter located near the affected areas of this station. The headman Kang Ji-hoon joined the conversation. They couldn't believe that there was a temporary shelter at Seoul Station. The subscribers added that the teenagers should watch the news. Seoul is blocked. Suddenly, the headman heard something outside. The guy felt some danger. He ordered everyone to duck. The headman looked out the window and expected to see the reason for his concern. Just then, a monster appeared in the window. It was very thin, with a thin neck and a hump. The teenagers quickly all hid under the chairs and sat quietly, waiting for the monster to calm down and leave. However, it seemed that the monster was not going to leave. He could feel their fear and smell. Headman Kang Ji-hoon was sitting next to the girl. The girl covered her mouth with her hands so as not to make any unnecessary noise. Suddenly, an innocent cat passed by the disgusting, soulless monster. The giant reacted sharply to it and turned back. It seemed that the monster had found a new victim. The cat turned to the zombie growls. He was not afraid of him because he did not know what he was capable of. However, the monster made its victorious cry, which meant that the zombie had noticed a new victim and intended to kill and eat it. The poor animal sensed danger and began to run. Cats are very fast creatures, so most likely he would be able to escape from the zombie monster. The giant chased after him. The monster's attention switched from one victim to another quite quickly. The teenagers were saved this time. The teenagers breathed a sigh of relief. The danger was over. Finally, they could open their mouths and express the fear that had been raging in their veins for the past 5 minutes. A classmate said that he looked through the map and found out that Seoul Station was 1.4 kilometers away. As if from the back seat, a female voice was heard calling out Lee Yeon-woo's name. It was So-yeon. It turned out that she was still thinking and remembering the boy. She asked what they were going to do with him since the boy was left there alone. The girl added that Lee Yeon-woo was waiting for them there. So-yeon felt a storm of emotions inside. The faces of her classmates were shocked. They didn't even remember the boy anymore. Everyone was thinking about their own things. The last thing the girl said in her monologue was that she was sure that Lee Yeon-woo was waiting for them. The headman Kang Ji-hoon was silent and pondered the girl's words. It was obvious that he was angry that So-yeon was so worried about some sucker Lee Yeon-woo. In the end, the guy said that So-yeon could try to go there alone if she wanted to. To make her even more scared, he added that she should think carefully because the situation was not the best and just got up. He never even looked at the girl. The headman added that they were going to Seoul Station. He identified himself as the main one and told them to trust him. Kang Ji-hoon said that he sympathized with Lee Yeon-woo, but it was too late to go back there. It was suicide. These words did not feel sincere. He said them so that his classmates wouldn't realize how selfish he really was. Meanwhile, Lee Yeon-woo was on fire. The fire was no joke, because everything in the cable car building was covered in white, sticky virus slime. As here, fortunately, the fire safety sensors worked and turned on the water. This should have put out the flames a little. Lee Yeon-woo was holding on to the wall because he could no longer stand on his own and navigate in space. The guy felt very bad. The black smoke was getting more and more. Lee Yeon-woo was choking and could barely breathe. He had to live. On the floor of the building lay the corpses of ugly zombie monsters. Everything was on fire. The room was almost invisible because of the black smoke. But unfortunately, the guy could not stand it. He held on until the last, but the smoke was too much and Lee Yeon-woo fainted and fell to the ground. For a second, the boy woke up and came to his senses. His body was struggling. He didn't want to give up. Not today. Drops of water from the ceiling fell on him. He wasn't fully aware of what was happening around him. It seemed that the boy had fainted again. Suddenly, from somewhere at the other end of the room, a familiar scream of a zombie monster was heard. This time it was a scream of pain. A huge, ugly monster was burning alive. Lee Yan-woo defeated him too, but at what cost? The boy reached up to stand up and defend himself. He probably thought that the monster wasn't defeated yet. As if on his hand, he noticed something very strange. He lowered it to take a closer look. The guy thought he was hallucinating. This couldn't be happening. Lee Yan-woo raised his hand right to his face to make sure that he had imagined it, and that these were all the consequences of breathing black smoke. But, unfortunately, no. There were frog eggs on the guy's hand. He didn't understand how he could have contracted this virus. Lee Yan-woo understood that this was the end. He would die before he had time to turn into a bloodthirsty, ugly, miserable monster. The guy lay helplessly on the floor of the burning building, inhaling harmful black smoke. His entire life flashed before the guy's eyes. He caught himself thinking that he had lived very little. Now the entire building was burning with bright flames of fire. Everyone who was there and turned into monsters would die. The unconscious Lee Yan-woo was lying on the floor when he suddenly heard some sounds that made him come to his senses. He opened his eyes because the sound seemed quite familiar and expected to him. It turned out that they were fire trucks. They came to put out the fire, but whether they would find the semi-conscious Lee Yan-woo is unknown. Meanwhile, the events moved to the bus stop where the teenagers were hiding. Headmaster Kang Ji-hoon stepped out from behind one of the transports. It seems that the class decided to run to Seoul Station after all. The guy was looking around the area so that the teenagers could get there safely and not get caught by the monsters. It was clear in front of them. The headman Kang Ji-hoon looked the other way. He didn't want unexpected troubles in the form of an attack by zombie monsters from around the corner. On the other side, everything was also clear. The capital, which used to be lively and crowded, was now so empty and gray. After making sure that everything was clear, Kang Ji-hoon ran to another bus and hid behind it. He approached the front door of the transport. It seemed that the guy had a plan. Finally, Kang Ji-hoon began to fulfill his role as the headman and not hide behind the girls. He opened the door handle, probably wanting to get inside, but the cautious guy didn't check if there was anyone in the unknown bus. Suddenly, the headmaster shouted to someone, opening the car door. It turned out that he was addressing his classmates, who were hiding behind their bus and waiting for instructions from the surprisingly responsible headmaster. And the class, like soldiers, on command, moved from their place and ran to the bus, which was to serve as their new shelter and safe place. As soon as the teenagers ran inside, Headmaster Kang Ji-hoon pounced on them with questions. Kang Ji-hoon was looking for a key and asked if his classmates had seen him. They began to search for the bus keys in a friendly manner. The girl asked the headmaster if he was sure that he could drive the entire bus. Meanwhile, a girl came running, panting heavily. Her legs and arms were shaking like an old woman's. The girl was breathing heavily and couldn't say a word. Her friend ran up to the girl. She was worried about her classmate and asked if she was okay. As if this were the case, she started screaming loudly. She said she couldn't do it anymore. Words were really hard for her. Suddenly, Kang Ji-hoon joined their conversation. He told her to think twice. The headman added that he was already sick of her and her antics. The girl's face changed dramatically. Kang Ji-hoon's face was very serious. There was not a single ounce of pity in it. A blogger stood up for her friend. She criticized the words of the headman Kang Ji-hoon and said that he could have said it differently, to which the headman replied that he behaved and said what he had to. So-yeon was about to say something. She was outraged by the headman's behavior. The girl began to see how heartless and cruel their classmate was. She screamed in pain. It turned out that it was her knee. It ached terribly and the wound still hadn't healed and was bleeding. A boy came up from behind. He saw that the girl was worried about her injured leg and asked how she was. The classmate was sincerely worried about her friend. So-yeon turned her head and was a little surprised, to which the boy told her to sit down because she didn't look very good. The girl got flustered. She answered briefly that she didn't want to sit down because everything was fine. In turn, So-yeon asked what the guy was doing. He was doing something in the wall of the bus. He answered questions with questions, and asked if So-yeon knew what kind of thing the guy had just taken out of the bus and was holding in his hands. He added that he had noticed it recently. There was one of these things in every bus. The girl was in a stupor. She understood what it was, but she did not expect such signs of attention from the guy who had previously been completely indifferent to her. It was a small red emergency hammer. It could break glass in case of danger without harming the owner. He continued and said that such things should be collected. After all, no one knows when they might come in handy, perhaps on a cable car. He was a little worried. It was noticeable. The last thing he said was that he would give the hammer to So-yeon. The girl became even more embarrassed, even blushed a little. She was pleased with such signs of attention. Their sweet moment was interrupted by the headman, Kang Ji-hoon. He shouted that he had found nothing, so he would not be able to start this bus. He added that there was no need to waste time and ordered everyone to follow him. The headman behaved like a true dictator. Kang Ji-hoon ran first between the two following buses. The cars were parked on the road to Seoul, which was blocked. After carefully examining the area again, the guy ran further. He no longer turned around to his friends or gave them signs to follow him. Between the two buses that the boy had just run between, there was an inconspicuous little shop with a bus stop. Kang Ji-hoon didn't even notice it or pay attention. In the reflection of that shop, a figure could be seen watching the teenagers running. It was an elderly woman. She silently looked at her classmates. Her face was not the most pleasant. The last bus was left in front of the class. It was necessary to act as carefully as possible because there was nothing to hide behind anymore. The boy asked what to do if they didn't find the keys in the last bus. Warden Kang Ji-hoon ordered that they would then walk to Seoul Station. The teenagers had already walked part of the way. Kang Ji-hoon shouted from behind the bus, saw that everything was clear and ordered them to run now. The first to run was the self-appointed leader Kang Ji-hoon. He shouted for the others to keep up and run after him. Kang Ji-hoon saw the goal in front of him, the door. He ran towards it and did not look back. The guy started pulling the handle to get inside the bus and carry out his plan. Suddenly, behind him, someone's old, unfamiliar voice was heard, shouting that the guy should not open this bus. In front of him inside the bus, the guy saw a monster. This also scared the guy because the door handle was about to open. The monster roared at Kang Ji-hoon, making itself known. His scream scared the headmaster so much that he dropped his mat and started to fall to the ground, covering his face with his hands as he ran. Kang Min stood with the rest of the teenagers behind the previous bus and shouted to his friend to run away immediately. Everyone was terribly scared. Suddenly, an old woman who had been watching what was happening came out of the shop and shouted for the teenagers to run to her. The classmates were shocked. They did not expect that there was anyone else here besides them. The teenagers were not going to run anywhere and just stood there. The old woman noticed the concern of her classmates and shouted to them again, telling them to hurry up. The woman was very worried. She called the children for the third time. The old woman began to order them to run away immediately. But the teenagers were even more scared by this. Some unknown elderly woman screams and orders them to run to her. Suddenly, a seemingly crazy old woman screamed that this bus was full of monsters. This evidence became decisive, and the classmates jumped out of their seats and ran as hard as they could to the old woman. The headman Kang Ji-hoon also managed to escape, and all the teenagers ran to the store, falling to their knees in front of the entrance. It seems that the bus full of monsters scared them very much. The children's hearts were pounding so hard that even the woman heard it. The teenagers closed the door behind them. Some fell to the floor and everyone huffed in unison. "As here!" someone called out to the teenagers. The voice was not an old woman's because it sounded young and painfully familiar. So-yeon recognized it and turned around to confirm her words. She couldn't believe her ears and eyes. Two other teenagers ran up to the girl. It seemed that they were their classmates. Meanwhile, things were not going as well for Lee Yeon-woo as for the rest of his classmates. The boy was in a dark room all alone. Had he really died and gone to hell? In the boy's opinion, hell looked exactly like this. Suddenly, the young man heard something. He still felt very dangerous and listened to every rustle. It turned out to be a huge, ugly zombie monster with 3 legs, similar to the one that killed his friend Kim Ju-byung. The boy had a burning flower pot stem in his hands. He swung it at the monster. The fire was supposed to save Lee Yeon-woo. The boy swung at the zombie monster and was about to strike. Suddenly, someone's ugly, covered in frog eggs and mucus, cold as a dead hand, touched Lee Yeon-woo. This turn of events scared the boy very much. He did not expect to see what he saw. The owner of the hand spoke to Lee Yeon-woo. He asked why the boy did not help him, although the unknown person asked him to do so. It turned out to be his friend Kim Ju-byung. The boy was very scared. He didn't expect to see his friend here, but Kim Ju-byung didn't look like his friend. It was like some kind of demon in front of him. The boy took his hand away from Kim Ju-byung's infected paws, but Lee Yeon-woo's hand had already been covered with blisters from frog paws. But Lee Yeon-woo was still scared and screamed. His eyes widened. He didn't understand why his friend Kim Ju-byung had done this to him. The boy looked at his hand. It was becoming more and more covered with blisters from frog eggs. Kim Ju-byung's mouth was being eaten away by the frog egg virus. His lips were barely visible. Almost all of his gums were exposed. Lee Yeon-woo's friend added that then they could be friends again like before. Meanwhile, the frog egg virus blisters were getting bigger and bigger. Lee Yeon-woo's blood ran cold at these words. The boy's face changed dramatically. Suddenly, the boy screamed loudly, and jumped out of bed. Lee Yun-woo couldn't understand where he was or what was happening. He was panting as if he had just run a marathon. It seemed like it was just a nightmare and nothing like that was actually happening. He looked around to see where he was. The last thing he remembered was the fire, the floor, and the Namsen cable car building. In front of him, Lee Yun-woo saw several more beds, white walls, many folders, wardrobes for clothes. The guy was still poorly understanding and analyzing. As here, Lee Yun-woo noticed something. He felt a sharp pain in the area of his arm, as if his consciousness had just come and his feelings had returned. The guy looked at his right arm. It was all wrapped and bandaged. Only 3 fingers were visible. He was interrupted by 2 adults who entered the ward. Both were wearing masks on their faces. It seemed that one of them, in a yellow shirt, was a doctor. The adults were talking about a manager named Lim who was supposed to come. Up close, you could see that the other one was an officer, but Lee Yun-woo was as surprised as the doctor when he saw him. The man in the yellow shirt told the boy to make himself at home, but the young man still wasn't very quick to analyze the information, so he just stared silently at the 2 men who must have come to visit him with his mouth open. He was given a pen and pieces of paper. Lee Yun-woo started filling them out. It seems the boy was left-handed because he held the pen skillfully. The boy was supervised by an officer. Lee Yun-woo asked him where to write his address, to which the man in uniform replied that the boy should simply write his contact information. Lee Yun-woo politely followed the adult's orders without asking any unnecessary questions. The officer was very surprised by this. It seems that other patients were not so polite and immediately attacked the workers with a bunch of questions. The man in uniform couldn't resist and started talking to Lee Yun-woo. He said that the guy was lucky. The young man was silent, digesting the information the officer had told him. So the officer continued. He said that it was really hard to survive now. He added that there was a fire station in Namsan where the cable car was, and his friend who worked there found the guy unconscious. In fact, he had saved Lee Yun-woo. However, the guy wasn't surprised at all. He just nodded to the officer and continued writing. The man in uniform stopped. Wasn't Lee Yun-woo curious about how he was saved? But Lee Yun-woo's answer surprised him. He asked what kind of city it was. His face looked so calm that it was eerie at times. Instead, the officer took the guy on a tour of the premises. It looked like a large gym with high walls and many windows, so the room was bright. The officer said that it had actually been a gym for the locals before. The man in uniform continued that they had been ordered to make this place a quarantine zone for the survivors, and to serve as an emergency shelter. He clarified that everyone who had been rescued in the district was all here. He and the officer were still standing there watching the scene unfold. As if on cue, Lee Yun-woo heard one of the patients ask if he could return to Bundangu. The guy also wanted to return to Seoul, so he asked the officer about it. Lee Yun-woo asked strange questions, as if he didn't remember what was happening in Seoul at the time. The officer was a little confused by this question, but he put it down to the fact that the guy hadn't fully regained his senses yet. The man in uniform told the guy that Seoul was currently completely closed to prevent the virus from spreading to other regions. The guy quickly searched his pockets for something, even though he was wearing someone else's clothes. The officer quickly ran somewhere to the door and said that Lee Yun-woo had to wait and that the man would find his things and bring them to the boy. Lee Yun-woo was left waiting a little worried. Everyone was behaving very strangely with him. Suddenly, the boy's hand hurt a lot, making itself felt. The pain was sharp. It felt as if something had been cut out of him, some part. Lee Yun-woo raised it to his face to examine it. He still didn't understand what had happened to it and why it was twisted and hurting. The boy looked at his hand intently for a minute and tried to remember. He felt that he was about to remember because the pain seemed to bring him back to consciousness. Suddenly, he began to remember. The boy's memories began to appear in his memory from the end, starting with the most recent. He remembered hearing the fire siren. He remembered lying on the floor of a burning building. Someone had set it on fire. He remembered waiting for a group of rescuers but mentally preparing for death. So, he had miraculously survived and should be grateful to this officer friend for saving him and carrying him out of the flames. And finally, the boy remembered that his hand was covered in white blisters. However, the boy could not remember what exactly had happened to his hand and why he was lying on the floor of a burning building alone. He still stood there like a statue, staring at his injured hand, trying to remember what had happened on that fateful day. Suddenly, someone called the boy's name, interrupting his session of rummaging through the gaps in his memory, which scared the boy quite a bit. It seemed that his body was still tense from stress or fear. Lee Yun-woo turned at the sound and his face changed dramatically. He couldn't believe his eyes. It was some guy. He was smiling broadly and asking Lee Yun-woo where the rest were, why he was here alone. It turned out to be his handsome friend and classmate. He was also here, but he was walking alone. The boy's face looked quite exhausted. The headmaster's question about where the others were really confused Lee Yan-woo. Was he really not alone in the building? But the boy didn't remember anyone else in the building. Lee Yan-woo's heart started beating fast for some reason. Suddenly, another classmate came up from behind and greeted the boy. It seemed that his friend was not alone in this building, the bunker. The classmate hugged Lee Yan-woo and cheerfully called him a brat. The boy's face was really sincerely joyful. It seemed that he was happy to see Lee Yan-woo. The classmate said that he was glad that everything was fine with the boy. He asked if it wasn't Isuri sitting in the corner. It seemed that it was another classmate. As here? The friend asked again where the others were. His face was quite calm. It seemed that he thought that if Lee Yan-woo survived, then everyone else did too. The second classmate hugged Lee Yan-woo. He joined the questioning and said that the boy always walked and was next to Kim Ju-byung. Lee Yan-woo suddenly realized something. This name caused some strong emotions in him, which made the boy's heart beat fast. As here, the boy's lips began to droop down. Lee Yan-woo remembered everything. He remembered that his best friend had died. The boy couldn't help him. Sadness and guilt washed over the boy like a big wave drowning a surfer. The events moved to the school office. The teacher stood in the middle of the class and told him what she thought about their group flow. She told the children to do an experiment in pairs, and then she would check everything after work. Lee Yan-woo sat at the back and silently listened to what the teacher said. Unlike the other children, he didn't get angry at all. All the teenagers got up and sat down at their desks when the teacher left the office. Suddenly, a classmate came up from behind the boy. He started talking to Lee Yan-woo about the experiment. It seemed like he wanted to be paired with him. It turned out to be Kim Ju-byung, his friend. Kim Ju-byung was scrolling through his phone and asking what ideas Lee Yan-woo had. Lee Yan-woo said that he had no ideas and would like to hear what his classmate had to say. He also added that if Kim Ju-byung watched another animated movie, he would kill him. Kim Ju-byung said that he had a brilliant idea. He was talking about a cosplay event in Seoul. Lee Yan-woo called his friend a sick scumbag. Kim Ju-byung laughed at this, as did his friend. The events moved back to the storage facility for those affected by the frog egg virus. Lee Yan-woo sat with his head bowed. They were outraged by what Lee Yan-woo had told them. Another classmate joined in the question and added that they had acted like real scum. Lee Yan-woo remembered the scene of the rest of the class running out of the building and escaping, jumping off the roof. That was the last time he saw them. The boy did not answer, remained silent, and thought about his own things. Anger gripped his body and mind. He also remembered Soyeon. She had seen him in the window of the building. Did the girl really not say anything to her classmate and not want to come back for him? He could not get angry with her. Feelings of sympathy were taking their toll, but the boy was still very disappointed in this girl. The classmates started making fun of the rest of the class that left Lee Yan-woo in the cable car building. Lee Yan-woo somewhere inside it was nice, but now it was not up to that. It was Park Min and Han Seong-yu. They were acting very nice to him now. It amused Lee Yan-woo. Lee Yan-woo, meanwhile, managed to tell his classmates about how he survived that hell. Isuri was sitting in the back and also listened to Lee Yan-woo's story. She asked if it was true that Kang Min had abandoned him. For some reason, she didn't mention the names of the other classmates who were also there on the cable car. As if here, two friends intervened in the conversation. Park Min ran into Isuri with the fact that she hints that Lee Yan-woo is cheating. Friend. Isuri did not react in any way to the provocations of her classmates. She only apologized and added that she did not know that they were still young. Park Min got angry. No one could be rude to him. He was an authority at school. He snapped at Isuri and told her to watch her tongue. Their quarrel was interrupted by Lee Yan-woo. He said that they did not know about something. The guy spoke to the floor without raising his head. Lee Yan-woo continued, without raising his head. He said that they did not know how everyone else died. They did not know anything and were small. He paused and added that they didn't know how and at what cost Lee Yan-woo survived. The two boys stood silently and looked at Lee Yan-woo. They didn't understand what he was getting at and perhaps didn't really want to know about his adventures on the Namsan cable car. Lee Yan-woo sensed this and didn't continue the conversation. He didn't want to trust the boys to set him up again. He raised his head at this moment. His eyes looked quite wary at this moment. Park Min's face hardly changed. He was very calm and cunning. Lee Yan-woo remembered that face. He added that this wasn't the first time he had been in trouble, as if this was an argument for Park Min surviving under strange circumstances. He hugged his classmate like he did with the soja on the cable car. Lee Yan-woo looked at his hand. He didn't like it. Park Min continued to ask. He wanted to know who else was there besides those scumbags on the cable car. He didn't have time to finish his question. He just stared into Lee Yan-woo's eyes for a few seconds, and the guy answered him in the same way. There was a short pause. Eventually, the guys got up and Park Min said it wasn't important. But the guy decided to play along with Park Min and ask why the guy stopped. While hugging Lee Yan-woo, Park Min noticed that the guy's hand was wrapped around him. He decided to ask his classmate what happened to him. The smile still remained on his face. Suddenly, a friend said that Lee Yan-woo's parents would be upset if they found out. He really perked up and told Park Min that he really hadn't called his parents yet. The first thing the boy did was call his mother. He walked away from the company. This fake conversation was already in the middle of his throat. His mother immediately picked up the phone. It seemed that she was waiting for his call and did not let go of the phone. There was noise in the background. Rescuers in protective suits told Lee Yan-woo's father that if he did not leave, they would have to use force. The mother nervously repeated her son's name twice more, thinking that he could not hear because of the noise outside. Also, so that the father would hear and come to listen to her son. Lee Yan-woo said that he had lost his phone somewhere and that it was his friend's number. As soon as the boy's mother heard her son's voice, she immediately cried. Then her father came over and began to calm her down. She continued that when the highway near Seoul was closed, they left the car and walked to Yangjadong. But because the virus was spreading too quickly, many areas of Seoul were blocked. The events moved to the medical center. The room was not made for a medical center, but something had to be thought up for the conditions of the apocalypse. The doctor sat in front of Lee Yan-woo and said that tissue necrosis had begun. He said it as if it was something bad. The doctor in a blue coat and mask asked Lee Yan-woo. He was interested in how exactly the fire had started in the cable car building. Lee Yan-woo was in no hurry to answer. First, he had to think about his words so that the lie sounded believable. Lee Yan-woo decided to change the subject and leave the doctor's question rhetorical. The doctor sensed the patient's somewhat anxious mood and said encouragingly that everything would be fine with his hand and it would pass in a moment or two. The doctor added that everything would get better soon and Lee Yan-woo shouldn't worry. He finally said that all the trouble was behind him and Lee Yan-woo could relax. He was in the quarantine zone. Lee Yan-woo thought about the doctor's words that it was safe here and he shouldn't worry because there were many soldiers in this room and they were not in danger. The doctor worriedly began to feel sorry for Lee Yan-woo. He said that according to the news, there were many people here who were looking for shelter, but there were many acquaintances of Lee Yan-woo. Suddenly, the doctor came to his senses and realized that he had said too much. When Lee Yan-woo was leaving, the doctor told him to hold on tight in any case. He added that the patient would return home soon and it was safe here. The doctor told Lee Yan-woo again not to worry. He went out, bowed, and the orderlies in blue coats called the next patient. Lee Yan-woo walked down the corridor and looked at his hand. He looked at it for an indecent long time. If anyone saw him, they would think something was wrong. He looked at it and thought about the fact that he had survived. The boy still couldn't believe it. Lee Yan-woo thought about the fact that he had risked his life but had survived. But suddenly, his thoughts turned from heroic to anger and even rage. He kept asking himself the same question. Why did his classmates do that to him? He didn't care about others, but she did. Lee Yan-woo thought about So-yeon. He knew clearly that the girl understood him correctly, but she didn't help the boy. The events moved back to the cafe where the rest of the class was hiding. Sitting at the table were Kang-min, So-yeon, and two new classmates who had recently joined. Although the group was talking about something, the girl was lost in her thoughts. Kang-min and Kim Min-ju were discussing the route to Seoul Station on the map. The guy found the way between Myeongdong Station and the station. Meanwhile, So-yeon was sitting on her phone and thinking. The girl didn't even blink. It turned out that she was looking at a locked phone, and she couldn't believe that she had become such a monster and did this to the guy who saved her. Meanwhile, the events returned to the shelter again. Lee Yan-woo was returning from the doctor to the hall where the whole crowd was. Suddenly, the events moved to an apartment. The traces of a zombie monster were visible on the window. No one was visible inside the room. The family hugged like the last time. The mother hugged her son tightly to her chest so that he wouldn't be heard crying so loudly. A whole army of zombie monsters could be seen outside the window. They crawled either upstairs or into their apartment. The situation was tense. The boy opened his eyes to see what was happening or to check that he was still alive. His eyes were filled with tears. Suddenly, the mother opened her eyes sharply in fright. It seemed that she saw or heard something outside the window that shocked her greatly. The monster outside the window opened its mouth and looked directly at the family, as if imagining how it would eat them. The events were broadcast live on the news. The man in the suit was going to give his comments and warnings about the situation in Korea. He introduced himself as the President of the Republic of Korea. He said that at the time of the filming, the capital of South Korea, Seoul, was facing the most serious surprise in its history. but the state is mobilizing all available and possible forces and resources to support the isolation events. They are also confident that after 3 weeks of quarantine, the cleaning of Seoul will be completed. It turned out that a classmate in a cafe was watching all this. The president also added that this was all for the safety of citizens and the country as a whole. He went on to say that the infected areas are classified by the level of consequences from 1 to 4, where 4 means the highest degree of infection. The government also took care of unfounded rumors that frightened citizens and sowed additional panic in the country. The president sincerely called on all listeners to cooperate. It turned out that the same table with teenagers was watching the news, and with them, the entire cafe. On the live broadcast, they continued to say that citizens who were in danger zones. The president's last words were that he recommended that everyone who was in the epicenter of the events go to the nearest shelter. Suddenly, the woman who let the teenagers in and who, as it turned out, was the owner of the cafe, brought a drink to someone and told him to drink it. She scolded a man and put a can of Coke on his table. The owner of the cafe noticed that she was being stared at a lot and turned to the culprits. She turned to the teenagers and asked if they wanted anything. The classmates were silent in a stupor. They did not expect the woman to speak to them. She brought the teenagers various carbonated drinks. They thanked her and began to drink quickly. The classmates had eaten almost nothing for the past few days. The woman allowed the other teenagers who were not sitting at the table to also take something from the refrigerator with drinks. Suddenly, the owner of the cafe asked if the children had come from a school excursion by chance. They answered in the affirmative, to which the woman asked where the rest of the class was. But the owner did not wait for an answer and commented on the words of some old man, saying that he was talking nonsense again. She further commented on her customers, saying about the man who was talking loudly and emotionally on the phone, that he always talked only about problems with the girl. The owner of the cafe left the teenagers to scold the man with the phone so that he would behave more quietly. Meanwhile, Kang Min shared with his classmates that he had installed a mobile application that reported emergencies. The guy added that the application showed that the area where the teenagers were was at the second of 4 levels of danger. The girl asked where the 3rd and 4th levels of danger were. So-yeon stared at the wall with glassy eyes, flying somewhere in the clouds. Suddenly, the girl began to be called by her classmates who were sitting at the table with her. They noticed that the girl was not included in the conversation. The classmate called out to So-yeon again, louder, which scared the girl quite a bit. Kim Min-ju asked if So-yeon had heard what Kang Min had said. She added that they were in a 2nd-level security area. The girl didn't really understand what to do with this information and how to react, so she just smiled a little in response. Kang Min asked Kim Min-ju if it wouldn't be better for them to go to Seoul Station. To which the girl asked a counter-question if there was anything on the news about help and if it wouldn't be better for them to wait here in the cafe. Kang Min replied that those were just empty words. He asked when the girl thought they would come to save them. It was Jasoon. She was lying with her head on the table, holding her phone in her hands. She told her classmates that she couldn't reach her parents. Kim Min-ju quickly started to reassure her friend that everything would be fine. It was just because there was no connection. So-yeon, meanwhile, was still holding the phone in her hands and staring at it. It felt like she couldn't bring herself to do anything. Her heart started beating faster and her blood pressure rose. She was breathing heavily and still staring at her phone. Suddenly, she abruptly put the phone face up on the table. So-yeon had wanted to call Lee Yeon-woo all this time to see if he was okay, but she couldn't. She lacked the courage. She looked at Kang Min and Kim Min-ju and thought that Lee Yeon-woo probably wouldn't pick up the phone from her. He must have hated her. So-yeon thought that Lee Yeon-woo might be dead and cried. Meanwhile, blogger Honmi decided to do a live broadcast for her channel. Her followers wrote words of support in the live chat and asked how she survived the bus. Honmi said that the viewers guessed where the girl was now. Her face kept smiling. Someone in the chat started writing that they saw the menu, and after that, guesses went that the girl was with her class in a restaurant or cafe. Honmi confirmed her viewers' guesses and said that the owner of this restaurant saved them, and it was thanks to her that they survived. There was a bus driver and a serious man holding his head in his hands. The blogger said that these two also survived. Someone on the live broadcast asked if Honmi could say hello to them, to which the girl replied that it was impossible. Meanwhile, Honmi thanked her for the donation of 10,000 won. The man looked at the blogger. The followers noticed the elder Kang Ji-hoon. He was looking out the window. The viewers asked Honmi to say hello to him. An old woman who owned a restaurant passed by the blogger's girlfriend. Unfortunately for her, Honmi noticed the woman and wanted to film it for her channel to show her savior to her followers. She started pestering the grandmother to interview her. Still, Honmi filmed the restaurant owner for her blog. The girl started telling me that she was the one who saved them and asked the grandmother to say hello to her followers. Suddenly, someone called the girl in a not-so-friendly voice. Hommi turned around at the sound. It was the serious man who was covering his face with his hands. He added that they were not here for fun and games. The man's tone was quite serious, but Hommi reacted to this in her own way. She said on camera that something was wrong with this man, but he could not stand this attitude towards himself. He started getting up from the table and calling the girl in an even ruder and more serious tone. He made a lot of noise and sounds when he got up from the table, which attracted the attention of other cafe patrons. Everyone turned and watched what was happening. He came close to Hommi. This scared the girl. Did this man really not know about personal boundaries? He asked in a rude tone if she didn't understand what he was telling her. His face was as relaxed as possible, and his voice was very dictatorial, as if he was talking to his subordinate through his mouth. But the girl was silent. She just stared at the man with wide open eyes. It seems that this silence annoyed him and he switched to swearing and shouting. This scared Hommi even more. All she could say was scream. Suddenly, someone appeared in front of the girl and began to cover her with his hands, pulling her away. This shocked the man because it was his conversation with Hommi and no one was supposed to interfere between them. He clearly did not like this turn of events. It turned out that it was the headmaster Kang Ji-hoon. Surprisingly, he behaved like a true gentleman and the head of the class, standing up for his classmate. He looked the man in the eyes and asked Hommi what happened here. Ji-hoon did not speak to the man. Hommi began to complain that this uncle threatened her, to which the man replied with swear words that this did not happen, and he simply asked that the girl turn off the broadcast, to which the headmaster Kang Ji-hoon said that they would turn it off. His answer was exhaustive. He continued that he would turn off the broadcast himself, and the man had nothing to worry about. The man responded to the boy's audacity by saying that they were just stupid, ill-mannered children. Suddenly, the grandmother, the owner of the restaurant, intervened in their fight. She shouted and swung at the man. The man sincerely did not understand what was wrong. He asked why he should be polite with such rude children. The woman began to lead the man away from his classmates to the table where he was sitting. From behind the headmaster Kang Ji-hoon, Hongmi shouted with tears in her eyes. She asked why this man was so aggressive towards her. In return, Ji-hoon was not polite to her, even though the girl was hurt because she had just been shouted at. He looked at his classmate. Hongmi was silent when she suddenly began to make a crying sound. Hongmi began to cry bitterly, wiping her tears with her hands. She explained that she only wanted to do better. Headmaster Kang Ji-hoon just silently watched his classmate cry. Finally, Kang Ji-hoon couldn't take it anymore. He asked why Hongmi was crying, and he seemed to reach out to hug her. Ji-sun joined her. They all hugged the girl and comforted her. Elder Kang Ji-hoon just silently watched this scene. He was a little sad that he didn't have time to hug Hongmi. Finally, he stopped arguing and left them, snorting loudly so that no one would think that he sympathized with Hongmi and wanted to be in her friend's shoes. He went to the window, where he had been standing before the fight with the rude man. He said to himself that they were all a bunch of idiots. Suddenly, Elder Ji-hoon heard a sound as if something had crunched. His expression changed dramatically. He jumped sharply from the window and began to fall to the floor while shouting all the gibberish words he knew. With his actions, he scared and sowed panic among other restaurant visitors. They screamed and began to ask what Kang Ji-hoon saw outside the window. Suddenly, something began to appear from around the corner. This creature's eyes glowed yellow. It had ears and was small in size. In the window, the cafe visitors noticed a piece of someone's red tail. When the teenagers realized that it was just a very brave cat, their faces changed and they relaxed. The danger passed. In front of them, outside the window, sat an impudent red cat. He looked well-groomed. The animal began to look at the visitors to meow, so that they would open the door and feed it. Suddenly, the owner of the restaurant quickly rushed to the door and shouted the cat's name, Sundok. It seemed that it was her pet. The grandmother fed her pet, and the cat purred gratefully in response. The owner of the restaurant spoke to the cat as if it were a real person. Her voice sounded very sweet. As here, the bus driver began to get indignant, shouting words from behind the grandmother. He said that it was not worth all sorts of vagrants to enter and wander around the restaurant. He said that this could be a big problem. To which the owner of this establishment said that it should be closed. After all, it was her restaurant, and she should decide who to let in and who not. The restaurant owner liked her pet's response, so she rewarded him with a treat. The teenagers joined in on the action. Hongmi started filming it, but the grandmother went to the window. She seemed to be waiting for someone else and was looking out the window. Ji-sun asked the restaurant owner what happened and why the grandmother was looking out the window. To which she replied that she didn't see Kim-song because two cats always walk together. And this time, Sunduk came alone. The events moved to the roof of a building where a ginger cat, most likely Kim-song, was sitting and licking himself to come clean for dinner. Suddenly, the cat heard something that caught his attention. It was a pigeon that had gotten caught in the white mucus of the frog eggs and could not get out of the trap, so it kept flapping its wings, making a lot of noise. It was this noise that attracted the cat's attention. Gimson went to the pigeon, perhaps to make it his dinner. Meanwhile, the bird was already completely wrapped in frog eggs. The cat saw the prey. His animal instincts did not allow him to simply walk past the victim who was in trouble. The events are again transferred to the restaurant that was a temporary shelter. Grandma asked about Seoul Station. She looked quite surprised. The teenagers stood next to her, and Kim Min-ju told them that they had to get to the shelter that was located near this Seoul Station. Kang Min looked at his phone and said that it was no longer safe for them to stay in the restaurant. Grandma tried to convince the teenagers that her restaurant was completely safe, even though it was on the first floor and had many windows, and the roads were littered with zombie monsters and the frog egg virus. Kang Min agreed with the owner of the establishment. The problem was exactly how they were going to get to the station. Suddenly, another man spoke up, calling the teenagers stupid kids. While the teenagers did not understand all the pathos of the man and just silently looked at him, waiting for some further speech, he added that the bus driver was standing right in front of him and smiled with all 32 of his teeth. They were all now looking out the window. The driver said that in front of them was the road along which the teenagers came. He said that there was a bus parked about 50 meters away. It turned out that it was his bus. He thought aloud further. Perhaps his bus was still clean, without surprises in the form of ugly monsters inside. And the problem was that the virus was raging everywhere. And if the bus driver's memory served him right, there were several monsters nearby. So getting to the bus was a bit of a problem. A rude man approached the company. He listened to their conversation for a bit and seemed to want to intervene. He turned to the owner of the restaurant and asked if she sold alcohol. His voice was calm as always. This question put the old woman in a stupor. Was this man an alcoholic and would start raging as soon as he got drunk? The grandmother brought the man some alcohol, and he began to stuff a piece of paper into the neck of the bottle. The owner of the restaurant got scared and shouted at the man with questions about what he was doing. The man calmly replied that it was a Molotov cocktail. He added that if the news was to be believed, his weakness was fire, so they should have at least tried. The bus driver supported the idea of the military man. After all, a Molotov cocktail could be thrown from a distance, which was quite safe. He praised the man. The action moved to a storage room where there was a warehouse of all sorts of things. There, the man poured gasoline on his cocktails. Homie quietly approached him. It was clear that the girl wanted to tell him something. She addressed him quite politely and amiably in Honmi's style. She asked if it was difficult for him to put it together and offered her help. Such an unusual request from a young girl shocked the man a little. Considering the fact that they had recently had a fight, he replied that he didn't need help. After all, children shouldn't have to deal with such things. Hongmi fell silent. There was a moment of silence. It was clear that the girl was gathering her thoughts to say something. Suddenly, she apologized to her husband and hesitantly said that she was wrong. She repeated that she had heard his story and said again that she was wrong. In fact, she was very sorry. The husband replied that it was all trifles. After all, she was just a child. The girl was happy that the conflict was over and now they could go to Seoul Station in peace. But the girl was also quite annoying. She asked if her husband had forgiven her. Honmi said that she heard that the soldier was in the cable car and asked if they had met before. She continued to pester her with this topic. She said that she was live broadcasting during the trip when they were on a tour. The soldier's face changed dramatically. It was felt that he was angry and very upset inside. Honmi couldn't see the man's face and he didn't answer. He was silent. So the girl asked again, letting her know that she was expecting an answer. But the soldier seemed to be flying somewhere in his thoughts, so he continued to be silent. Then Honmi apologized and said that she was talking nonsense again. But suddenly, the man answered her. He said that it wasn't the girl with him, but his fiancé. Honmi's face changed dramatically. She felt sorry that she had touched on such a sensitive and painful topic for the military man. She asked if it meant that he had lost his fiancé. Honmi also apologized for this situation because she had no idea. The girl suddenly fell silent and thought. Her face became so sad, as if she was about to cry. Suddenly, tears flowed from her eyes. Honmi began to tell that they had also lost many of their friends there. Honmi covered her eyes with her hands. The girl's crying turned into hysterics. She said that she had not thought that something like this could happen during their trip. Suddenly, the headmaster Kang Ji-hoon approached them. He asked his classmate what she was doing there with this man who had been rude to her. Then he noticed that Hongmi was crying and asked about it, making a curse word that meant that he was annoyed that the girl was crying so often, at which the classmate turned around and told Kang Ji-hoon not to interfere with her. Kang Ji-hoon looked at the man. He did not expect such a statement from Hongmi. The man was also surprised and turned his head sharply towards the boy. He did not think that Kang Ji-hoon would apologize. The man's thoughts were confirmed because Kang Ji-hoon turned sharply and silently walked away from them, his head held high. But Hongmi didn't just leave it like that and commented on her classmate's action. She called him an arrogant boy. The man asked if they were close to this guy Kang Ji-hoon. This question confused the girl a little. She looked at the man, then down at the floor and thought about what to say to him. The girl turned her gaze to Kang Ji-hoon's back, who was walking away from them, as if in a movie at sunset. Meanwhile, the bus driver called his daughter Jinyo. He told her that he would be back soon. The man spoke very nicely to his daughter so that she wouldn't worry. The conversation was overheard and asked if the bus driver had spoken to his daughter. He turned to the sound. His face was very smiling. It turned out to be the owner of the restaurant. She noticed that the man was very excited and happy. He ended the conversation and said that his daughter was like an angel to him, and in order to see her again and play with her, he would do everything possible and impossible. Meanwhile, the soldier and Hanmi were walking with a full box of Molotov cocktails in their hands. The man said that everyone should gather for a while. The man said that they should all stick together until they reached the shelter. The soldier took one bottle in his hands and held it up for everyone to see. He started talking about the Molotov cocktail. The man said that throwing them was quite dangerous, so he ordered that he would do it himself. The guy started talking about how he didn't trust people easily. He asked if they should just be set on fire and thrown at the monsters. The man didn't look at Kang Ji-hoon so as not to get annoyed, but he was very angry at the guy's behavior. The soldier exhaled and said that the fire could stop and the fuel could run out. It was too dangerous. To which the guy told him that it wasn't the main problem. After all, there were a lot of annoying, ugly, and dangerous zombie monsters around. He started to prove to the man that they weren't little children, and that's why everyone would throw Molotov cocktails. The soldier took another deep breath and shouted at Kang Ji-hoon, calling him an idiot. In the end, the man agreed and said that they would share all the Molotov cocktails between them. However, she did not object and looked out the window and said that everything was fine. She did not turn to face them, and added that they should have left without her. Hongmi immediately attacked the old woman with hugs and her sincerity. She tried to persuade the owner of the restaurant to go with them. The soldier joined in the conversation. He asked if everything would be okay with the owner and added that it would really be better for her to go with them. The old woman interrupted him and said that everything would be okay. They all need to get to the shelter as soon as possible. To which she replied that this place had been her home for 30 years. The owner of the restaurant added that the thugs shouldn't worry. They should leave quickly. Everyone gathered. It was time to leave. The soldier was standing at the door with a Molotov cocktail in his hands and said that he had to check everything first before they left the restaurant. Suddenly, he noticed a monster in the window, walking and growling. He was a potential danger and would most likely attack them if they left the restaurant even after some time. So the soldier threw 2 Molotov cocktails at him. The zombie monster caught fire. The supplies hit the target exactly. Everyone else stood outside the door and watched the monster burn. Hongmi hid behind the man. He turned to the others and said with a serious face that everything was now clear and gave the order to move. It was clear that the soldier was in his element. He continued to command them to prepare everything they wanted to take with them in advance, to have everyone run out at the same time and quickly reach the bus. Kang Ji-hoon was clearly dissatisfied. He didn't like the man being in charge. Suddenly, So-yeon spoke. She started asking if everyone remembered what she had told her classmates earlier. He abruptly closed her mouth and rudely said that he didn't want to listen to anyone's whining. Kim Minju lashed out at him. She yelled at her classmate and said that he was acting too impudent. To which headman Kang Ji-hoon told Kim Minju that she didn't know what she was talking about, since she wasn't with them on the Namsan cable car. So-yeon looked at the floor in fear, thinking about how stupid they were. Her eyes widened. Fear for her friend Lee Yeon-woo was in them. She wondered if Kang Ji-hoon's words were about Lee Yeon-woo or about herself. The girl began to worry. After all, her leg was still injured. Did he really think she was a weakling because of that? The bus driver noticed the girl's condition and turned to her. But it seemed that the man noticed not only her condition, but also So-yeon's leg. So he asked what happened to her. He looked at the leg again to get a better look. The wound was quite fresh and deep. The bus driver looked at So-yeon sympathetically and assumed that she must have been in pain. He was worried about the girl, and he said that even if her leg was fine now, she still had to be careful. She didn't know how to react to this, so she just nodded. She was surprised that her friends didn't worry about the girl at all. Meanwhile, the soldier had already given the order to run. Hongmi and Kang Min immediately ran after him with a box of Molotov cocktails. The owner of the restaurant even came out of the restaurant and said that they had been careful and taken care of themselves. She was a surprisingly nice and kind woman. They ran and thanked her for everything once again. The soldier again ordered everyone to run after him as fast as possible. The last ones were So-yeon and Kim Min-ju. The man continued to give instructions. He said that they should not run close to the buildings, but to stick to the center of the road. He continued that the Molotov cocktail should be thrown to the ground so that the bottle would definitely break, and that at the same time it was necessary to beware of pigeons. Suddenly, the bus driver started to stop the soldier and reach for him with his hand. It seemed that he saw a zombie monster ahead of them, which was eating the unfortunate kitten on the ground. Suddenly, the ugly giant saw a crowd running towards him and growled, trying to scare people. As here, the headman Kang Ji-hoon and the soldier swung their cocktails at the zombie monster. They flew straight to the target and the ugly giant caught fire. They dealt with it quite quickly, and the monster no longer posed any danger. The man looked at Kang Ji-hoon strangely. There was strong anger and rage in the teenager's eyes. The headman Ji-hoon said lightly that it turned out that zombie monsters were nothing. So the boy ran forward, carrying another cocktail in his hands. The soldier shouted at him from behind to think things over and not do foolish things. The owner of the restaurant was watching them carefully through the window. Suddenly, she saw something that made her eyes widen and her mouth drop. She noticed her ginger cat Gimson. He was walking calmly between the houses. Grandma, without thinking, immediately ran out to her Gimson and pounced on him with questions about where he was going. But she stopped for a second. Something about her fluffy pet seemed quite strange. The cat Gimson did not react at all to the hostess, although earlier he immediately ran to her so that the old woman would feed and stroke him. The restaurant owner's eyes widened sharply. For some reason, she began to feel danger from the cute domestic cat, who had never heard a fly before. But here, the cat answered its caring mistress and meowed politely. And here, the grandmother calmed down and the anxiety subsided. She affectionately called her furry pet to her so that he could eat deliciously with her. This scared the grandmother again, as if she had noticed something very strange. But suddenly, the cat began to cough heavily, as if something was stuck in its mouth and make strange sounds that it had not made before. The grandmother watched her pet with anxiety and shock. She could not believe her eyes. A dove, or rather its remains, began to come out of the mouth of her previously cute furry pet. The eyes of the restaurant owner widened to the size of oranges. She shouted the cat's name, not believing what she saw. Her cat's eyes darkened, and he began to make strange sounds like zombie monsters. The pet's face was covered with a frog egg virus. Meanwhile, the escapees almost reached the bus. The headman Kang Ji-hoon ran ahead because he considered himself independent. Suddenly, he screamed and swung a burning Molotov cocktail. It turned out that he was throwing it at a zombie monster that was in their way. Right in front of the bus, there were several ugly zombie monsters burning. So the headman approached Kang Min and asked him to give him more Molotov cocktails. But the headman Kang Ji-hoon did not listen to him. Suddenly, the bus driver shouted loudly. It turned out that he had found his bus, which had not yet caught fire from Kang Ji-hoon's war games. The transport was the last in line. The driver ran first, breaking away from the crowd. He shouted that Dad would return soon and said the name of his daughter, Jin-yo. But the man was so blinded by the feeling of victory that was about to come that he did not notice something on the side. He turned to the monster's scream. Just then, a huge zombie monster attacked him from the window of another bus. He was quite cunning and was waiting for his victim, sitting in ambush. The bus driver's eyes widened sharply. He screamed and began to act sharply. The man could not bring his daughter down. He had to survive and come to her. The bus driver jumped away from the zombie, not noticing So-yeon, who was running behind him. He pushed the girl. The chain was started. So-yeon pushed Kang Min back. Now everyone was in danger. The guy was carrying Molotov cocktails in his hands, but due to the collision, he dropped them. They could have broken and caught fire. Elder Kang Ji-hoon even stopped. He saw a zombie monster attacking his friends. Without thinking twice, the guy threw his burning Molotov cocktail at the ugly, huge giant. Kang Ji-hoon aimed really well, and this time he hit the monster clearly and it caught fire. So the people in the collision could stop for a while to analyze what had just happened. So-yeon was very angry with the bus driver because of him, she had again become a problem for Elder Kang Ji-hoon. As the girl expected, the guy came up to them and started scolding them, calling them idiots. As if this were the case, Kang Ji-hoon started screaming like crazy. He scolded Kang Min, calling him names whenever he wanted. It turned out that all the Molotov cocktails had been broken after all, so Kang Ji-hoon kicked the box with his foot in anger. But Kang Ji-hoon never managed to knock over the box with bottles because a soldier pushed him. Suddenly, someone started calling Kang Ji-hoon's elder. His displeased face from the fact that he was put in his place did not even want to turn around at the sound. It turned out that it was the bus driver. He was angry at what some teenager who was 3 times smaller than him said. The man shouted at Kang Ji-hoon and called him a little shit. He demanded that the boy answer for his words. It was good that the soldier held the bus driver, otherwise there would have been a fight. But Kang Ji-hoon turned out to be no ordinary person either. Suddenly, the bus driver shouted something that made Kang Ji-hoon's face change dramatically. But the bus driver didn't stop. He continued to shout at the teenager. The girls Hongmi and Kim Minju began to stand up for their classmates. But it seems that the man didn't know how to admit his mistakes, just like the headmaster. So he became even more indignant at the teenagers. He said that it seemed like they didn't really need the bus. After that, everyone's faces changed dramatically. The man started to make excuses that he fell because someone pushed him from behind, even though everyone saw that it was the opposite. The bus driver didn't stop. He accused everyone of trying to kill him. The man continued to threaten, this time looking at Kang Ji-hoon. He continued to look closely at Kang Ji-hoon and called him a little shit. Suddenly, someone's apology was heard from behind the bus driver. It was So-yeon. She said that the bus driver fell because of her because she fell first and most likely pushed the others. The girl with a very tired face looking at the floor apologized to everyone and took all the blame on herself. Her head dropped even lower. The girl apologized one last time and asked them to forgive her at least once. He looked at poor So-yeon, who was so brave and smart that she was able to take all the blame and end the fight. The girl just stood there looking at the floor, pretending to be guilty so that everyone would believe her. Suddenly, the bus driver just turned around and left. It was the act of a real man to hide under the skirt of a little girl whom he most likely hurt and not even apologize. Passing by the headmaster Kang Ji-hoon, he pushed him with his elbow, although there was enough space, and told the little one to look at his feet. Surprisingly, Kang Ji-hoon remained silent. Suddenly, he had a brain that finally gave him the right commands to act. Hongmi approached the headmaster. The girl turned to her classmate, which surprised him greatly. The classmate looked Kang Ji-hoon straight in the eyes and asked if everything was okay with the guy. But instead, she received rudeness in her direction. Kang Ji-hoon pushed her away and told her to stay away from him and not touch him. So-yeon stood there, adjusting her clothes. Suddenly, someone asked her if she was hurt. The girl finally raised her gaze to look at this man. It was a soldier. He looked at the girl with sympathy. So-yeon replied that everything was fine. She didn't want to complain, although in fact she had hit herself pretty hard and her leg was still making itself felt. She simply thanked him briefly, without looking the man in the eye. Suddenly, their conversation was interrupted by the sounds of running and screaming. The crowd saw the same old woman, the owner of the restaurant, running towards them. She was shouting words for help, holding onto her hand. The woman turned back and screamed. It seemed that she had seen something she didn't want to see. Everyone was surprised and their mouths were open. Only Hongmi began to wave her hand happily and greet the grandmother. The girl thought that the owner of the restaurant had decided to go with them after all. Suddenly, her joy turned into fear. The grandmother shouted for them all to run away immediately. She ran and shouted as hard as she could, for them all to run away as fast as they could, and as fast as they could. Her face looked very scared. Meanwhile, the bus driver had already started running first, while the others did not fully understand what was happening, but also started running away. Suddenly, the man saw something, which made his eyes widen greatly. They showed great surprise. It turned out that the old woman was running after her cat. The people could not see much, but it was clear that it was carrying something in its mouth. The grandmother noticed that they did not react much to her words about running, so she switched to the mat and still ordered them to run away. Meanwhile, the cat was almost catching up with her. Suddenly, he bent down to pounce on the owner of the restaurant. His face was almost completely covered with frog eggs. He released his white tentacles and they reached the woman's head. That was the end. The good old woman could not be saved. The people saw the little cat knocking its owner to the floor and immediately began to run away as hard as they could. Now they saw and felt the full danger of what was happening. Meanwhile, the owner of the restaurant still thought that it was her fluffy good pet Gimson. He looked down at her, let out his white tentacles and growled. Suddenly, the grandmother screamed even louder. There were sounds of eating. Now the escapees had two new threats. It was the grandmother's cat, which was devouring the face of its owner. The old woman was screaming loudly. She was in pain. A soldier ran behind So-yeon and ordered everyone to run quickly to the bus. They would be safe there. The crowd began to jump into the bus one by one. The first were teenagers Hongmi, Jisoon, and Kim Minju. Meanwhile, the bus driver was already starting the transport. Everyone was hurrying and pushing those who got on the bus first. Suddenly, the bus driver looked at those who got on in surprise. Did he really expect that he would go alone? From the back of the transport, the sounds of zombie monsters were heard. They were approaching. The bus driver began to panic. His heart beat faster, his blood pressure increased. He looked at the photo next to the steering wheel, where he and his daughter Jinyo were. Meanwhile, the rest of the crowd was running away. The headman Kang Ji-hoon was picking up the bottles of Molotov cocktails that were left behind. But Kang Ji-hoon did not listen and was still collecting ammunition. The rest of the escapees were about to reach the bus. They were running as fast as they could. Suddenly, Kang Ji-hoon noticed that the bus doors were closing. The guy ran to the door and started knocking on it. He shouted to the driver to open it because not everyone had gotten in yet. But the bus driver didn't even look at him. It was obvious that he did it on purpose. Ji-hoon continued to knock on the door and scream. The man said that he couldn't take any more risks for these scumbags. He continued to look at the photo with his daughter. And then, the man touched the gear shift and the bus started moving. He forgot that it was because of these scumbags that his daughter might never see her daddy again. Kang Ji-hoon was angry. He shouted at the driver and knocked on the door. Others ran to him, but the bus had already started moving. Everyone was shocked by such a despicable act by the bus driver. Hongmi noticed that the driver had started moving, but the others hadn't gotten inside yet. She started to stop the man and said that they couldn't leave them there, they could die. Kang Ji-hoon watched all this through the glass of the door. The girl shouted at the bus driver and said that her friends hadn't gone inside yet and asked him to wait. But the driver was very angry, barely holding back his anger. Hongmi was still shouting for him to stop the bus. Suddenly, this crazy guy swung at the poor girl who was trying to protect her friends, hit her and told her to get off him. The headman Kang Ji-hoon saw all this. He was shocked and shouted at the girl. She fell to the ground. Kang Ji-hoon saw the girl holding her cheek. He shouted and asked if she was okay. The boy ran as fast as he could. He wanted to help his classmate, but the bus was speeding up. The girl looked at her friend and cried. Her cheek turned red, and blood was about to flow from her lip. Kang Ji-hoon's face was almost invisible. The bus was going too fast. This was the end. The bus driver watched the teenagers say goodbye and just pressed the gas pedal, accelerating the bus. Kang Ji-hoon saw the face of this scum. He shouted obscenities at him and threatened to kill him. But the transport was already too far away, and the headman could only see his ass, shouting to follow him. The bus driver looked in the rearview mirror, that the rest had stopped and stopped running. He was amused. This was an absolutely evil person, inside of whom there was nothing bright. Kang Ji-hoon stood and held his breath. Now he could feel how Lee Yeon-woo felt when they abandoned him on the Namsan cable car. Kang Min screamed and couldn't believe that they had just abandoned them. They didn't know what to do now. Walking to the shelter was too dangerous. Kang Ji-hoon stood silently. His body was filled with anger. He wanted revenge. If it weren't for the teenagers, this worthless bus driver would never have made it to the shelter and his transport. He stood up and shouted at the top of his lungs how much he hated this man and his entire family. Suddenly, a cat started to approach the group that was discussing something loudly. The cat screamed, so So-yeon and Kang Min heard it and turned back. The others followed them immediately because the roaring had increased because there were more cats. One of the cats that was closer meowed as if greeting the company. As they got closer, you could see some frog eggs on it. The company did not notice this, so they stood silently and watched what would happen next. Suddenly, the cat screamed again, but this time half of its face was already covered with frog eggs. This is what the company noticed. Their faces changed dramatically. They understood that trouble awaited them, and they had to run away from these seemingly innocent cats. The boys and girls noticed that all 4 cats were already infected with this frog egg virus, and they were heading straight for them. The company screamed and started to retreat back. It was necessary to think quickly and come up with a plan of action. Suddenly, Kang Min lit his Molotov cocktail from behind and shouted for everyone to move away and he would throw the weapon at the cats. But the headman Kang Ji-hoon did not let him do this and said that a classmate gave him the Molotov and he would throw it himself. So-yeon covered her mouth with her hands at this time. She was very scared and was the only girl among them, and also with an injured leg. A soldier noticed her as she stood. He ordered everyone, including So-yeon, to stand behind him. He felt responsible for these children. Meanwhile, the once pets were getting closer and closer to the company and growling, reminding them that in reality they were no longer cute kittens, but bloodthirsty zombie monsters. The soldier picked up a Molotov cocktail, stood in front of everyone, and swung it at the cats, hoping to hit them. The cats sensed danger and got into an attack position and growled. The soldier slowed down. He said that this was the last Molotov cocktail, so he had to use it perfectly. The man prepared to throw it and ordered that when he gave the signal, everyone else should quickly run away. Suddenly, the cats meowed at the same time and looked at their victim. They began to release their white tentacles at the soldier. The man gave a signal. His eyes widened. He might not make it. The cats grouped into one huge zombie monster, and this explosive mixture attacked the soldier. His eyes widened even more. The chances of escape were small, but this way he could delay the zombie monster and the teenagers would have more time to escape. The man threw a Molotov cocktail at the large zombie boss, which was made of 4 cats, and shouted to the others to run away immediately. The soldier managed to break free and ran with the teenagers. The events moved to the shelter. Lee Yan-woo sat in the corner, covering his face with his hand and looking at the floor near a mountain of boxes. The employees distributed supplies to everyone who wanted them. The crowd gathered a lot and everyone tried to grab as much as possible. It turned out that the guy had fallen asleep. His body was still exhausted. He still couldn't come to his senses, but the screams of the people nearby were too loud. So Lee Yan-woo woke up and started to open his eyes. Suddenly, before his eyes was a huge zombie monster that was about to attack him. It had already opened its huge mouth and was preparing to bite him. The guy's eyes suddenly opened. He woke up instantly. Lee Yan-woo jumped up and screamed. But from the oversleeping, he could not stay on his feet, so he fell to the floor, realizing that it was just a nightmare, and now he was completely safe. But the boy landed on his hand, so it hurt. The boy groaned in pain. He looked at his hand. He was surprised that it still hurt, and this pain was very strange, not like from a burn. Suddenly, someone came up behind him. The boy was shaking all over and was screaming in pain. Some hand tried to touch the boy, but Lee Yan-woo reacted too sharply. He attacked the hand with his fists. However, it turned out that they were only his classmates, Park Min and Ham Seong-yu. They really scared the boy. He looked at them with his scared eyes and was very angry. Probably, in the eyes of his classmates, Lee Yan-woo just looked like some kind of crazy person. They silently looked at him, not understanding such a reaction. Ham Seong-yu continued to chew. When Lee Yan-woo finally realized that he was not in danger, he apologized to his classmates, still laughing loudly. Park Min continued to look at him. It was unclear from his gaze how he felt about Lee Yan-woo, as well as from his actions. But this time, he pleasantly surprised by taking out some food and handing it to the boy. Lee Yan-woo asked what it was, to which Park Min replied that it was bread that was distributed to everyone. It was nice of them to bring food to Lee Yan-woo. The boy immediately opened it. He didn't even remember the last time he had eaten properly. Just then, they heard someone arguing loudly. The argument was about someone's patience running out and that someone had heard enough. A man demanded that the employees call the manager. The argument escalated. A man in a red sweater and a cap was scolding someone severely, and the employees were trying to calm down the scandal. Park Min was sitting on the phone and asked his friend Ham Sung-kyun if he knew what was wrong with the man. Sung-kyun replied that he heard that they were angry because the employees wanted to help the homeless. He looked at the homeless people sitting in a circle nearby. A couple walked by them, and the girl, not shy, said loudly that she smelled very bad. Meanwhile, the homeless people turned to the employees in yellow shirts and asked if they had any cigarettes anywhere. This was watched by their classmates, and Park Min joked that this virus seemed to be spreading faster. To which Ham Seong-yu asked what his friend was watching, if it was something funny. The guy turned to his phone and looked at it, to which Park Min reacted a little surprised. It turned out that the classmate was just watching some YouTube video about the frog egg virus. But why the guy was smiling all the time was incomprehensible. Park Min turned to Lee Yan-woo. He asked if the guy had noticed that if you look closely, some viruses had cells, while others did not. Lee Yan-woo did not react very emotionally to this interesting observation. But Park Min continued anyway. He said that the funniest thing was that a virus that did not have cells could completely merge with its host. He added that this was what the monsters on the internet called merged. Ham Seong-yu laughed at this name. It seemed that they both found it funny what was happening in the world. But Lee Yan-woo was alarmed by this information. Suddenly, someone interrupted his thoughts. It seemed that someone was looking for them. It turned out that this someone was an officer, and he was looking for only Lee Yan-woo. The man in uniform brought the boy's personal belongings as he had promised. However, the young man had already forgotten about it. He brought Lee Yan-woo to a cell and said that the guy could pick up his things only after he signed for them. Lee Yan-woo did everything and thanked the officer. Finally, the guy could see what was on his phone while he was away. Lee Yan-woo started to turn on his device, but it didn't respond at all. Only a black screen in which the guy saw himself. The officer noticed this and suggested that Lee Yan-woo bring a charger. The guy thanked him for his concern and left. Suddenly, he heard a sound that resembled nausea. He turned around and asked if the officer was okay. But it turned out that it wasn't the officer, but some woman who was vomiting in the middle of the corridor. She was clearly sick. Workers in sanitary gowns, gloves, and masks approached the woman. The victim fell to the ground. She was still nauseous. Lee Yan-woo gradually moved away from the situation that was happening, but watched. The woman said how bad she felt. She was nauseous all the time. The picture was not the best. Suddenly, the guy felt a sharp pain in his bandaged hand. It was like thousands of needles were simultaneously entering his hand and palm. Lee Yan-woo cried out and raised his hand to see what was wrong with it. He said out loud that he had almost forgotten about this burn, but it hurt again. Meanwhile, the woman was still sitting on the floor. The guy crouched down somewhere in the corridor. His thoughts were weighing on him. He remembered Park Min's words about a cell-free virus completely merging with its host. Lee Yan-woo was afraid to even think about it. What if he had contracted the frog egg virus in the burning cable car building back then? The guy decided to go further so as not to arouse suspicion. He had to charge his phone and check it, and at the same time watch the video Park Min had mentioned. As he walked, he remembered what kind of frog egg virus had fallen to them in the Namsan cable car cabin. He clearly remembered that there was a cell virus, but the zombie monsters they all fought. They looked fused, just like the ones in the YouTube video that Park Min watched. It didn't look like they had cells. Lee Yan-woo looked at his hand again. He didn't want to admit it, but the boy had to be honest with himself at least. Eventually, the boy realized that the frog egg virus that he had contracted was on his hand. Meanwhile, while the boy was looking at his hand, he didn't notice Isuri walking behind him. Suddenly, the girl noticed that Lee Yan-woo was staring at his hand intensely and couldn't pass by his classmate anymore. Isuri called out to the boy to find out what was wrong with him. Lee Yan-woo was a little scared when he heard a familiar voice. The boy had to pull himself together and behave normally, to which she received a comprehensive answer of nothing. Isuri spoke with a stony face, even a little tired. She said that it seemed like Lee Yan-woo had wandered in here by accident. She asked further if it was because of his hand. Lee Yan-woo immediately grabbed her. His body language showed that Isuri's words hit the mark and hurt him deeply. But Lee Yan-woo calmed himself down and said that he was just picking up his things. But Isuri was not an ordinary person. She read Lee Yan-woo like an X-ray, so she ignored her classmate's answer and continued asking. She asked again that Lee Yan-woo got this wound because of the fire on the Namsan cable car. But the classmate also said that he was there alone, so the girl asked who could have started such a big fire there. Lee Yan-woo stopped and asked why Isuri was interested in this. He didn't want to answer his classmate's questions, so he changed the subject as best he could. Her face still remained stony. She asked if it was okay to ask her about it. Lee Yan-woo started shouting. It was obvious that the guy was very nervous. He said that he didn't know anything about the fire. Maybe there was a short circuit. Isuri, with the same stony expression, put forward the hypothesis that someone might have deliberately set the building on fire. Lee Yan-woo looked at her as an enemy. He didn't know what to expect from his classmate and what she wanted to do with this information. But this didn't calm Lee Yan-woo. He turned around and shouted at Isuri. He was angry at the girl's indifference. He cursed and asked what her classmate meant by this. But Isuri's answer surprised the boy. The girl said that she wanted to know. She added that she wanted to know if she could trust Lee Yan-woo. This time she looked straight into his eyes. Her face looked more alive. This phrase shocked the boy greatly. He opened his eyes and mouth wide but remained silent. He was choosing the right words and simultaneously thinking about what he had just heard. The boy decided not to blindly trust Isuri. The trauma of betrayal was reflected in him, so now he distrusted all his classmates. His eyes widened sharply and his teeth became numb. The boy looked bad. He fell to the ground, holding his hand. It seemed that it hurt again, but this time even more. But still, the girl was worried about her classmate and changed her stony face. Lee Yan-woo seemed to have moved to another world. During the pain, he was thrown out of reality and did not understand where he was. He held his hand. He again felt that thousands of needles were pricking his hand at the same time. Suddenly, a familiar sound brought him back to reality. This made the boy panic, because along with the sound, memories came to him. Lee Yan-woo understood immediately. But the boy could not believe his eyes. They were in a safe place. How could this happen? When the teenagers turned around, they saw a woman starting to turn into a zombie monster. The orderlies were running away from her in horror. Lee Yan-woo and Isuri stood in a stupor and did not understand what to do. The boy thought that he would not encounter these disgusting zombie monsters again. Meanwhile, someone was watching the news again. They were talking about the residents of Seoul no longer using cranes. Suddenly, a man wearing glasses and a mask started cursing at everyone. It turned out that it was a live broadcast. As it turned out, it was Park Min. He was watching this humorous news and laughing at what was happening. Ham Seong-yu was also sitting on his phone. The announcer on the video swore that he was completely serious. It was unclear whether he was joking or not. He continued to swear and call everyone who watched the news on TV fools. The guy urged everyone to listen to his channel instead of the news. Suddenly, the mockery of this fake news was interrupted by a sharp, loud sound. His classmates turned around at the sound of the noise. The two boys saw how the orderlies one by one started running out of the other part of the shelter and shouting for everyone to run away. However, Park Min and Ham Seong-yu just watched silently and did not understand what was happening. Meanwhile, Isuri and Lee Yan-woo were in real danger. The woman who was turning into a hideous zombie monster began to rise and growl, which meant that the transformation was about to end. Lee Yan-woo watched in horror. A clear understanding flashed through his head that the pain in his arm was not for nothing. The guy had a bad feeling that the pain in his arm had done something to that woman, and that it was because of him that she had turned into a zombie monster. His heart was beating fast, his blood pressure was accelerating, and his breathing became heavier. Suddenly, an officer came out of the room that was right next to the injured woman. In his hands, he held a charger for Lee Yan-woo. The man in uniform trembled all over when he saw what was happening to the poor woman. He stood in a stupor and did not move. Meanwhile, the woman was already getting up. The officer was clearly in danger, but he could not move from fear. He looked through the crack in the door at what was happening. Suddenly, his eyes widened greatly. He heard a scream and saw something he did not want to see. The woman raised her head and looked at the man in uniform. She screamed at him. The officer started to close the door and asked if she was okay. The woman opened the door harder. The officer's face looked even more shocked and scared. However, the man did not give up. He tried to close the door back, although it was already starting to be covered with frog eggs. Suddenly, the woman started screaming for help. It was a really sincere voice, begging for salvation. She started screaming as if her stomach was on fire. Her voice became more and more rough and no longer resembled the helpless one who was asking for help. She screamed in a non-human scream, so that he would just help her. Meanwhile, Lee Yan-woo and Isuri watched what was happening. The girl ran without thinking. The guy stood there and continued to look at the painting. Suddenly, Lee Yan-woo shouted to the officer to wait. Isuri heard this and stopped. She thought that her classmate would also run. But Lee Yan-woo ran away in the other direction and shouted to the officer that he would come to him right away. But Isuri called her classmate. She did not understand what he was going to do and why he was not running away from danger, but instead was walking towards the epicenter of the events. The girl shouted to Lee Yan-woo to stop, but the classmate shouted in response for Isuri to find someone who could help him and as soon as possible. He told his classmate Isuri that they should help him immediately, but the girl did not understand the heroism of her classmate. She stood for a few seconds in a stupor and could not believe that Lee Yan-woo was really going to risk his life. Finally, Lee Yan-woo shouted that he was already in a hurry and left the girl alone with her thoughts. Isuri shouted at him that he was an idiot and had completely lost his mind. But Lee Yan-woo did not listen to her and ran on. He had to save the officer. The girl turned and noticed an emergency exit plan and a map of the room behind her. Meanwhile, Lee Yan-woo ran as hard as he could. He had no plan, only the goal was to save the officer. Suddenly, he saw something while running for the rescue. This made him slow down a bit and slow down. It turned out to be a fire extinguisher. Lee Yan-woo took it. It was the only weapon he had. There were thoughts in his head that the guy was too reckless, but he couldn't do anything about it, so he just ran at the zombie monster with that fire extinguisher. He watched as the zombie monster was about to touch the officer. If that happened, there would be no one to save him. Suddenly, Lee Yan-woo was again torn away from reality. His hand holding the fire extinguisher suddenly ached again, as if it felt the owner approaching the zombie monster. It felt like the woman who was turning into a hideous monster also suddenly felt Lee Yan-woo. She turned to the boy and turned away from her victim. Lee Yan-woo ran to her and stopped, heaving loudly. He told the madam to calm down and breathe deeply. The monster just looked at him in shock. Lee Yan-woo continued to calm the woman. He said that the man behind the door was not a doctor. But the woman was shocked by the guy's speech. She was outraged that he told her to calm down. How could she be calm when her stomach was literally burning from the inside? The zombie monster started calling Lee Yan-woo a little shit. She said that he had no idea what she was feeling. The woman asked if the guy would be able to calm down if he were in her place. It felt like the zombie monster's patience was about to end. Suddenly, the crazy woman attacked the guy with screams. Lee Yan-woo was shocked by this behavior. It turned out that the zombie monster could not be calmed down with words. He reacted quickly. It was clear that the guy had almost no fear. He pointed a fire extinguisher at the zombie monster and foam poured down on the woman. Lee Yan-woo didn't fully understand what was happening. He looked at the zombie monster and screamed, pressing the fire extinguisher handle harder. Meanwhile, almost everything was covered in white foam. It felt like the fire extinguisher didn't help much, and Lee Yan-woo was starting to understand that. Even the strong pressure that was flying from the foam didn't really stop the zombie monster. It attacked Lee Yan-woo and screamed for him to die. The woman looked very crazy and wished the guy death, as if she blamed him for what happened to her. Lee Yan-woo was frozen. He couldn't say anything or back down. He just watched the zombie monster fly towards him. Suddenly, someone shouted at him to move, idiot! This someone was holding a hose. It turned out to be Asuri. She brought a hose with water and directed the jet directly into the zombie monster's face. The girl shouted at her classmate that his idea was very stupid and foolish. Such a strong pressure of the water stream threw the zombie monster back, and the woman fell on her back to the floor. Lee Yan-woo watched in great surprise as Isuri saved him. The classmate turned out to be smarter than he thought. Suddenly, a frightened officer came out of the door of the room. He was trembling with fear. Suddenly, Lee Yan-woo noticed that the man in uniform was holding his hand. He noticed that the officer's hand was covered in the frog egg virus. The officer shouted that this could not be. The virus was spreading too quickly. Lee Yan-woo looked at it with horror. He couldn't believe he hadn't saved his friend from death. The man in uniform began to scratch himself, thereby helping the virus spread throughout his body. The officer looked at Lee Yan-woo, his eyes watering heavily. The man begged to call someone for help, but she didn't have to wait long. Employees with weapons in their hands and yellow suits were already running towards them.